Continue this meeting. Madam Clerk, please do a roll call.
Mr. Trainee?
Here, ma'am.
Ms. Dembowski?
Present.
Mr. Evans?
Here.
Mr. Flynn?
Present.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Honeman?
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Honored to be here, Bud Long.
Ms. Johnston?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Starr?
Here.
Mr. Still?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We're still conducting testimony on item 14A. Please, if you haven't testified yet, please come forward. Give us your last name, spell your last name so the clerk can spell it correctly for the records. You cannot testify if you've already testified once before. Thanks for putting up with us. It takes a while on electronics sometimes.
Hi,
Welcome to the meeting.
Hi, my name is Johanna Urich, E-U-R-I-C-H, first name J-O-H-A-N-N-A. The problem with the Fourth Avenue Theater is it's empty and neglected. The best way to keep any structure is to use it, maintain it, and love it. To have such a magnificent and visible building remain empty and neglected is bad for downtown. It needs to change, and I think it can be done so that the building remains enlivened with new life and relevance in a downtown shaped with the Fang family energy and vision. If the Fangs can cantilever it over an alley to preserve a walkway, then they can cantilever it over a theater and build into the sky what they dream. I believe the visions of Cap Lathrop, who built the theater, and the Fangs are compatible. I think people can work with the Fangs to make this happen. I would suggest a true public-private partnership with the Historic Preservation Commission and other members of the community working with and raising money to make it happen. It'll take time, and our new mayor could help lead this effort to write up a contract to protect interests on all sides and do it right. I have great admiration for the Fang family. I've never met them, but the minute I saw their building in Midtown, I was in love. It's built for an urban future. It's smart and lovely. It's a model for the future. Unfortunately, it's in the middle of sprawl. I worried that the Fangs would not have the patience and resources to wait for the city to catch up. We desperately need to grow up into an urban, walkable city, and I'm happy to see a developer wanting to be that builder. I also believe the city needs to get taller in downtown and that more people need to live there. With more local residents, downtown might have real stores instead of just gift shops, and that is revitalization. It is this forward thinking and style that I admire in the Fangs. Ironically, that's also what I admire in the Cape Lathrop's Fourth Avenue Theater downtown. It was a statement made by a man who deeply believed in Anchorage as a city and urban place. It anchored downtown in its time. Lathrop, like Mr. Fang, was a tough, smart businessman. I think the impulse that informed Lathrop is kin to the impulse informing the Fang family. I think it will take work, but it'll be worthwhile to give Anchorage and the Fang family and Lathrop legacy something to be proud and something that our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren can use, love, and live in well into the future.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any questions from Assembly members? Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Why don't some of you guys come down the front row? You're all here to testify, so please join us. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Cheryl Love Green. Thank you to the Assembly members for attending and giving us this opportunity to speak to you today. I'm here to oppose AO number 2015-49, the proposed ordinance to designate the Fourth Avenue Theater and associated properties as deteriorated for the benefit of the property owners. As you know, the Fourth Avenue Theater has been an icon in Anchorage since 1947. It is ironic that we are considering tearing it down as we celebrate our city's 100th birthday. There's no doubt that the Fourth Avenue Theater is in sad shape today. The difficult part is in deciding what to do about it. Given the track record, I'm not confident that the current property owners can do the historic theater justice by themselves, and I'm dismayed at the minimal nod to restoration proposed in their plan. There is public will to explore other options based on public testimony, a rally headed by Robert Gottstein, and recent activity on Facebook. I've not had time to do extensive research, but here are a few examples of historic theater restorations that may prove to be worth examining as examples. The Waglin Theater in Klamath Falls, Oregon, is also an Art Deco-style movie theater. Several foundations, businesses, and volunteers raised money to preserve it as a theater and art center. The Waglin Theater became a privately owned, not-for-profit corporation when it purchased the newly renovated facility from the city of Klamath Falls. Since that time, it has operated as a privately owned and operated theater with continued support from public and private sources. The Cascade Theater in Redding, California, was built in the 1930s. Support from over 1,800 community businesses, individuals, and organizations, and the assistance of Southern Oregon University created a multi-use theater run by the JPR Foundation. The Will Rogers Theater in Oklahoma City was built in the same time period as our theater. It is now an event center that is owned by the Western Concepts Restaurant Group, which owns and operates a theater, the Lobby Cafe and Bar, and other restaurants. These are just the examples I found this morning in a quick online search. In conclusion, there are other ways we can save the Fourth Avenue Theater, and there's no need to pass this ordinance. Please vote against this measure and give the public more time to find solutions. This is an important part of our history that needs to be preserved before we lose it forever.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions from Assembly members? There don't appear to be any questions. Thank you, ma'am. Welcome, sir.
Hello, Assembly Chair, Mr. Trainee, Assembly members. My name is Bob Curtis Johnson. The last two are hyphenated, Curtis-Johnson. Been in Anchorage 31 years, in motion picture preservation for about 20 years here now, and also was on the Fourth Avenue Committee back in 2007. The state sent me to Los Angeles to learn about historic theaters. I think you all are aware that the programs in the theaters are what keeps them vital. Having the buildings are important, but sometimes we have to bridge the ownership of that building until we can get the programs in place. Once it's gone, it's gone. Keeping the facade is one thing, but what happens inside is most important. A few $1 million is on stake right here. I think I heard it was bought at auction for much lower. A lot of these programs out there in the world are running at $95 million restoration efforts. Sometimes these theaters are turned into homeless shelters, not shelters, but actually just de facto, they're tenanted by folks. They're turned into car parks, they're spray painted, they're destroyed. This isn't anything near what other cities are facing. We have an opportunity in front of us because it is actually in reasonable condition. We have to get those easements in place on the historic murals, of course. The city probably is the right folks to do that. Private folks haven't managed to keep that in place over multiple years. I have a problem personally because I told Augie Hebert, Pioneer Broadcaster, that I would lay down in front of the bulldozers. So we need to deal with this, and maybe I'll be out there doing that. I hope not. My daughter mentioned this the other day. She said, you know, taking the facade, leaving that, and sort of showing that to the world and gutting the heart of the building is really a huge mistake, because that, where the people gather, that is what makes this a vital building. This is what connects us to our past. And I think honoring ancestors, honoring our elders, and the work in a state that has so few true historic treasures would be a complete mistake for this to happen. I think it's all in your hands, and I hope that the city will make the right decision here. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn has a question, sir. Mr. Flynn's over here.
Actually, just thank you. I'm aware of your work with AMIPA and other organizations, so thank you for your efforts to maintain Anchorage's history.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
There are no other questions. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward.
Hi. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Gina Holloman, Hollomon. I still have an echo. And I'm the former executive director for Anchorage Historic Properties, and I still have a seat on their board. I'm also a local business owner. I wasn't born in Anchorage, but after 35 years, I feel I grew up here. Like many who have already spoken, my love for the 4th Avenue Theater runs deep. The past week, I have sat back and listened closely to the number of testimonials that we've had. Basically, there's been a lot of love and passion shown for the memory of the theater. There's also great optimism for the future project that the Fangs are proposing. In the mid-1980s, the PAC was being built, and Anchorage Historic Properties presided over the restoration of the 4th Avenue Theater. To celebrate the work being finished, and prior to the Alaska Repertory Theater taking over use of the space, Gone with the Wind was played, and my signature was on the first page of the guest book. At that time, the theater was in good repair. The offices upstairs were occupied. The Anchorage rep used the theater until the PAC was completed, and I'm sure, like many of you, I enjoyed many performances there. An attempt to place a historic easement on the theater was made at that time, and Mayor Fink declined that opportunity. Jane Anbeck and I headed up the campaign to save the theater in 2006 and 2007. We tried to encourage voters to pass a ballot measure for the city of Anchorage to purchase the theater. That ballot failed, and subsequently, the supporting funds that the state and Rasmussen Foundation had offered went away because neither could support a project that the citizens had turned down. In 2006, I had the opportunity to play the last film in the theater, which was the 1932 Eskimo. At that time, operating a popcorn machine blew fuses in the breaker box. The elevator worked, the offices were in disrepair, the roof leaked, and the penthouse appeared to be in pretty good shape. That was the second opportunity that we had to place a historic easement that failed. I've had conversations over the years with folks from the San Francisco office of the National Trust for Historic Preservation regarding both the theater and the Fang family. I'd like to say that they consider the 4th Avenue Theater maybe the... May I continue? I just have a little bit more.
If you could summarize.
Okay. They consider the 4th Avenue Theater maybe the most important structure in Alaska because of the architects, the streamlined modern style, and the type of construction that was used at the time. They also have great respect for the Fang family, Peach Investments, and their San Francisco projects. As much as I love the 4th Avenue Theater, it's now in private hands, and the owners can do with it as they please. It's my understanding, and it's also my belief, that they intend to do the right thing by honoring the theater's history and the murals for the community. I support their project, and I also believe that a commitment to preserve these elements should be written into the tax abatement from the very beginning. I would like to work with Peach to determine what elements besides the murals and the facade are salvageable. It's my belief that everyone involved... Pardon?
You need to sum it up. You're way over time.
Anyway, I support the project. I just think we need to make sure that it's in writing.
There are no questions from the assembly members. Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome, sir.
Hello. I'm Steve Heimel. I'm a broadcaster. I live in Spenard, Steveheimel. I won't bother to talk about how long I've lived here. I will say that I also signed that register that Ms. Holloman was talking about there. And everything I wanted to say has already been said, but that won't stop me. I want to enter 2 words that appeared in a letter to the editor in the newspaper this morning. Unseemly rush. Those words need to be in the record. This needs some deliberation here. You need to get the people who have already been involved, re-involved, to really craft something that means something. This is a massive project, $200 million investment in our downtown is something we don't want to pass up, but we really need to do it right. And it needs some process, and we haven't seen the process yet. I was absolutely delighted a few years ago when the Fang family approached our public broadcasting entity and said they wanted us to be involved and maybe relocate to something they wanted to do with the 4th Avenue Theater. I thought, I'm so happy this family has control of this property because I know they really will do the right thing. They will do a good job with it. But the suddenness of this and the idea of when they talk about facade and they don't talk, and the woodwork, but they don't talk about the volume inside is not mentioned. Yeah, I have some hesitations. I think it needs some work. I have every confidence that this body will do that work. Thank you.
Question for Assembly members. Mr. Flynn has a question, sir.
Mr. Heimel, besides clipping coupons, what are you up to these days?
I'm hustling around like everybody else.
Well, congratulations on your retirement, sir. I'm sorry I couldn't attend the event, but we're all proud of your excellent work in Anchorage.
Thank you very much.
It's been a while since we heard you on the radio, sir. Mr. Holman?
I just wanted to send the same and apologize. I couldn't make it. I was at work, so I couldn't able to get to your retirement. But congratulations, and also thank you for all your years in broadcast.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnston?
I just want to say that I still see him on the bike trails.
You betcha. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, sir. Appreciate it. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome, sir.
Chairman Traney, members of the Assembly. My name is Bob Mitchell, M-I-T-C-H-E-L-L. The 4th Avenue Theater has been listed on the National Register since 1982. The nomination to the register was written by a gentleman who also wrote Patterns of the Past, which is kind of the definitive history of downtown Anchorage. And in the National Register nomination, he described some of its attributes, which I will extract from it for you. In Section 7, he makes these statements. 4th Avenue Theater is considered by experts to represent the culmination of the Art Deco movement in the United States. Skilled practitioners of the art here honed down the showy nature of the 1930 to 50 style into a gem-like distillation of highest quality, beautifully integrated into regional motif and a creative, exciting individuality, unsurpassed by any other known example in the Pacific Coast region. The interior of 4th Avenue Theater is the spark that brings the building to dramatic effect. The casual look toward the ceiling brings into focus the familiar Big Dipper and North Star constellations, shining forth in a configuration of twinkling starlight. And from Section 8 in the nomination, he says, the theater is a landmark in the transition of Anchorage from a frontier community to a city of permanence. It is a landmark in the development of a city in which families live, work, play, and die. In consideration of its interior and exterior, this building represents the foremost, indeed, one of only two significant Art Deco buildings in all of Alaska. One who goes to a downtown movie here in the idle moments before the feature starts may observe the respect that the audience holds for this building. As eyes wander from mural to the rich walnut woodwork and the Big Dipper ceiling lights, it becomes apparent that this is a special place for Alaskans. This theater was built especially for Alaskans. It is the culmination of a sincere wish to bring to the people of Anchorage and to visitors from all parts of Alaska a theater unexcelled on the American continent. These were Mike Carberry's words back about 32 years ago. As an architect with more than 20 years experience in historic preservation work, I can tell you that dealing with large volumes like the theater auditorium is always a difficult problem. However, I can also assure you, based on experience, that there are a number of ways this space can be handled and incorporated into a successful project. And I really encourage you to support that.
Thank you, sir. There are no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Well, Mr. Potter.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, my name is Tim Potter, P-O-T-T-E-R for the record. I work at Dowell. Been around a while. Got the white hair to show it. I've known Joe and Maria Fang for the last 27, going on 28 years. I've enjoyed a long-term relationship with the Fangs and have worked on all of their projects that they've performed and done and completed in Anchorage. My experience is that they do what they say, and they typically go beyond that. They have the design, development, and financial acuity to perform on their projects, as we've seen around town. And possibly the most important thing is that they have a world-based long-term view of the future. And that's what they bring to this project and this downtown. I have met all of their children and have worked with both Derek and Terrence for at least the last decade. Derek is here approximately 50% of his time, and Terrence, who could have lived anywhere in the world as in his current situation, he chose to make Anchorage his home. He finished his college career here. He bought his residence here. He works here every day. He met his now wife here. He has had both of his two children here, which is now the third generation involved in the fabric of this community. And hopefully they will stay here. I know that that's his choice. Yes, the all-important grandchildren are here. The third generation is here, woven into the fabric of this city. I say these things to counter some of the comments that came out Tuesday night from some of the people that would suggest that the Fangs and the Changs are not really part of the community. In fact, they are. And they are the type of people within the community that we want to make sure come here and stay here and provide generations of input into the development of the city. Now let's talk about process. This action that is before you today is truly a very simple thing. Based on 1235, this is a question of you being able to find that the properties involved are in fact meeting the definition outlined in 1235 as being deteriorated. And I believe without question they do. I kind of give you a simplified version of this, and maybe you can laugh or think I'm silly, but sometimes it's easier to look at things in a very simple fashion and see what we're really looking at and what we're up against. Say you're 16 years old and you go to DMV. You go up first and you pull a number off the number thing, and then you sit and wait until your number's called, and you go to the first window. You say that you're there to try and get your driver's license. The next step starts. You get to take
Let me see if we have anybody who has a question. Mr. Oman?
Mr. Potter, if you can get to that point, I'm curious. I've been there before myself here in DMV.
Sure. Just real quickly, and then one last point on the process. But I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this is the very beginning and the simple part of the process. The hard work really starts at the next step, which is built into the 1235 process, where there has to be a specific request identifying the levels and the amount of abatement, the timing of any deferrals, and the justification for those things on a detailed pro forma, which means you need to understand what the project is. You know, Jane Anvik brought up a very good point that it is not this step that we're in now when the details are necessary. It's the next step that MOA, MOU, whatever you want to call it. In most cities around the country, they call that a development agreement, which is something the Live, Work, Play Housing Committee has continued to ask for, and I would hope that the Assembly would put that on your ledger to get done, that this city needs to have a process where there can be a contractual obligatory functioning contract between a developer and the city so both sides know what they're doing and it's enforceable. The process itself, we have this, we have the next step. As far as the development of the project, there will be a replat, which will be a process. There will be a conditional use because there will be more than 50 parking spaces, just as the Fangs did, going through a full public process and getting their conditional use approval for the tower previously proposed on this site. Beyond that, there'll be a conditional use for going over the top of the alleyway, which will be considered a skywalk. And additionally, there'll be bonus point analysis for any of the structures that are built there. So this is just the beginning.
Sir. Mr. Starr? Okay.
That's it. Anyway, when you go to the counter, you're 16, you get there, you have to bring your birth certificate. My son forgot it and got booted. So he did that the second time. But you get to go through your vision test, your written test, and then your driver's test. We're in line just to show that we are 16 years old. Show our birth certificate. That's as simple as that. Thank you.
Tim, last time I looked at 1235, it has some criteria that has to be met for this body defined as deteriorated property. I think there's 4 or 5 different things that have to be. Any one of those qualifies for that document then to be brought to us.
Yes.
So.
And that material, in my view, has been submitted to you already and qualifies as that. If you have any specific questions about my impression of the interior of the building and the status of the building, I went in the day that the Fangs got the keys, and I can tell you what I saw. So with that, I'd be happy to answer.
We may call you back up later, Tim. We may call you back later.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere.
Thanks.
Welcome to the meeting, ma'am.
Hi. Has everybody got a copy? Alaska Girls Rock? My name is Loretta Beaton Macbeth. My grandfather was Johnny Beaton, the man who discovered the great Iditarod gold strike. Before Ray Peterson died, we had an interesting conversation, and the 4th Avenue Theater came up. And he said, Loretta, did you know that your granddad wrote Cap Lathrop a check to help him build the 4th Avenue Theater? I said, I didn't know that. I said, how do you know? He says, well, I was sitting there when he wrote the check. So we're talking about throwing away history here. We don't need development at the 4th Avenue Theater. There's so much other property downtown and other places that this could be done. I am a singer-songwriter, and I have an album out called Alaska Girls Rock. And this is a prelude to a full-blown Broadway musical that the novel that I've written is going to be out at the end of June on Amazon. After that, I'll start doing the scoring for a full Broadway musical that I always dreamed of since I was a 5-year-old girl would be staged at the 4th Avenue Theater. This is a jewel. I don't know how many of you here grew up with the 4th Avenue Theater, but that would make a big difference because when we had so very little here in Alaska, the 4th Avenue Theater was that jewel that we all gravitated toward. And Alaska has so few historical buildings that why would we want to do this? Old Northern Lights Inn, let them get started on that. Let's see what they're going to do with that. Why the 4th Avenue? And I just want to reiterate what Steve said. Please, let's give this a little more time. Let people come together. There's so many other things we can do at the 4th Avenue. And I beg you to really consider this, because this isn't just a building. There's a lot of artists out there that the PAC just doesn't have the right facilities for. We could put on a play every night. We could raise millions of dollars at that theater. My job, other than being a songwriter, is I'm a development director for charities. We could turn the 4th Avenue Theater into a charity-driven venue that would supply all of the charities with enough money where they could establish their own permanent fund. And there's a lot of artists out there. It wouldn't only be my show, but we could make it into a nonprofit, designated it as a historical site, and really give back to the community, because we're facing a lot of people are leaving here. My favorite store at the Penny's Mall just closed down. So businesses are closing down here. We need to find something. We don't need more shopping. There's plenty of places to live. What we need to do is find something that will draw people down. Entertainment will bring people down. You take away one of the most beautiful pieces of property in this state, and it's not that dilapidated. Come on, you guys. I've been in there. And if you go in there and check out what Robert did while he had it, it is beautiful. And it's something we need to cherish. And I just beg you guys, give us a little more time before you vote on this. There's no rush. And I would really appreciate that. And I know a lot of people would too. And I thank you very much for letting me speak.
Question from assembly members? There are none. Thank you. Welcome, Robert.
My name is Robert Gottstein, G-O-T-T-S-T-E-I-N. I would hope that we could have a conversation instead of 3 minutes, because there's been a lot of misinformation here. So, I'd like you to ask, what is the condition of the building, because that's not a 30-second answer. Where are we on what alternative options there are for the theater? What options does the city have in regards to this? What are the costs and benefits? In my view, and I was born in the territory in the middle of the last century in what is now the parking lot of Benihana's. My family's been here 100 years. We've owned property here for around 95 years. Our view is this, or my view, I'm not going to speak for Carl Gottstein, is this isn't economic development. Economic development is when Providence puts in new equipment and people don't have to go to Seattle to get procedure and money is spent here. Economic development is when the airport, when UPS and FedEx come here and create jobs. That's economic development. Creating more space doesn't create economic development. It moves people from one space to another. If we're going to lower the property taxes for this Peach investment, this is, for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction, because it's going to raise everybody else's taxes and lower their net operating income, which is going to lower their values here. And if you don't really kind of understand that, then you need to slow down and understand that you're really raising taxes. And when, you know, I sat through all the testimony, and when two developers come here and say they're in favor, that tells me they're going to line up and do the same thing, lowering their taxes, raising everybody else's. So I think we should really review what the ordinance is intended to do. I'd like to see it limited to residential. That's a way to create more residences downtown. We have a affordable housing problem in town. We don't have a commercial development problem in town. You know, there have been statements made to me that the boilers are still the same that they were originally. That's not true. I've been told about the price. There's a misstatement about the chairs. You know, I managed 2 million square feet for Carl Gottstein, did the maintenance on him, and have developed hundreds of thousands of square feet of property, redeveloped over 100,000 square feet. So I have kind of a knowledge about not just buildings in general, but I have 18 years worth of experience in that theater. And if you think of it in terms of it's a 1947 Rolls Royce, because it was the top. So anyway, I know my time is out, and I'd be more than happy to have
You're
more
gonna have
than...
questions, sir. Mr. Tolman?
Mr. Gassney, thank you for being here. I do have a few questions, and the first is I've been in the building. I've been there when I was a younger, actually teen. Attended a few movies. I've been there as an adult when the seats had been removed, and the Chamber of Commerce had a few meetings there. I've been to a few functions and events. So I guess my first question is how long did you actually own the building yourself?
18 years.
18 years. And the condition of the building was, we were given an exhibit from 2006, a report that was where a building was inspected now nine years ago. And it did show some issues and concerns, codes and things that if you were going to try to either renovate the building, repurpose it, there's a lot of things that, of course, codes are grandfathered if it just continued to be maintained and upkept. So my question is where are the seats? The theater seats were removed so that they could be purposed for the meeting hall and such, but where are the seats?
Let me first say that they were not the original seats in the theater. Those had been replaced. And so I had concluded that a single screen theater in downtown wouldn't be economic, so I had to figure out something else. And what I did do actually was economic. My loss of the theater had nothing to do with economics inside the theater. So those seats, I decided, well, what am I going to do with them? So it's interesting. I've never sold anything on eBay. I would be surprised if eBay even existed in 1992 when I did this. What I did do is I gave them away to nonprofits like KKM, who auctioned them off for years so that not only would Anchorage residents have a piece of treasure of the 4th Avenue Theater, money was used to help nonprofits. So I don't know who they all went to. There were hundreds of them, but there are still, people have come up to me in the last couple of days saying, I have a seat here. So that's where they are. They're in the hands of residents who cherish the theater.
And then the kitchen, I understand, has been completely taken out or removed.
Well, it didn't have a kitchen originally, and I didn't, when I did the restoration and renovation in 91, 92, I didn't include it. But what I did discover was that the hall was a spectacular hall for events. We could do movies. We had live stage. Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons and the Temptations, Jewel, Gloria Allen and I produced the Fantastics and Forever Plaid. So it's modestly changed in order to meet the times. I joke by saying I had to level the floor. So when spaghetti was fed to people, the spaghetti wouldn't, slide off the plates. So the building is in great shape, really. I mean, when I heard the description on Tuesday and last Friday, they were absolutely accurate, although it was what it was when I walked in 1991, not what it was like when I walked out in 2009, because I made it handicap accessible. And how did I do that? Well, it was an old building. What was I going to do with the elevator that under current code needed to be 3 or 4 times as big? But there's a provision in the Uniform Building Code that the city worked under that said, well, as long as it met the spirit of the handicap accessible, there can be compromises made to avoid impacting the architectural integrity of the building. So what was agreed to is that I didn't need to replace this huge column of concrete and displace all this space. I just needed to buy a wheelchair that would fit into the elevator, and that served the handicap to get to the mezzanine and the second floor offices and the third floor offices that made that building handicap accessible. I did other things to make sure that every square foot, except the penthouse, there's no elevator to the penthouse, so that portion is not handicap accessible, but the rest of the building is.
Anything else, sir? Mr. Starr has a question. Mr. Starr, sir?
Well, thanks for your brief on your history, and I guess I ask you, perhaps on equal par with the Fangs, you've got, as your resume you just stated, your degree in economics, and you have a long history and certainly great mentors that showed you the business world. Why isn't it a functioning and viable entity now under your tutelage and your money spent and all that. Why did it
because
fail?
I made a mistake. And it had nothing to do with the Fourth Avenue Theater. That's the huge misconception here. It's huge. And you need to walk away from that misunderstanding. I bought Augie Hebert's stock from him in 1997 and borrowed money from North Rim Bank to build a new studio and to buy equipment and to put a new team together. And if they'd just waited a little longer, maybe it would have worked out, but it didn't. But I had pledged the Fourth Avenue Theater as collateral. So what happened had nothing to do. There's 7,500 square feet of office space. That'll pay for 100% of the heat, lights, and the taxes. By the way, the taxes are $17,000. The assessed value is $1,158,545. And they purchased it for $791,000.
So certainly the office rent and the viability of that's a far different application as even you've applied than a Fourth Avenue Theater. So
no, I'm describing
didn't you take it from what people are describing as their hometown theater and their cultural spirit place? Didn't you take it away from that model then and move it into what you propose nowhere in regard of the Fourth Avenue Theater functioning?
I considered myself a steward of the building, and I didn't do anything to alter the architecture unless it was required. I don't think it's necessary today.
You answered the question about your business model, and that was kind of where I wanted to go. I want nowhere to enter into a blame game on the current condition or why this is in front of us, because it's really past your issue. You did your thing in the day respectfully, and now the answer and the question in front of us is far past who the voters want to get involved. Now we're to the next thing as are we discussing this development tool. So your answers on all the other stuff are helpful, but Mr. Gottstein, as I have communicated with you, I'd like to know your reasoning specifically why the development tool approach.
Why the what?
The development tool, this deteriorated property strategy is so problematic. And I don't want you to go into it at length, but we've heard it from others. It's just a matter of the issue in front of us now is this development tool for a status of tax rebate or admissions thereof.
I think we're learning in the last week that there may be some flaws with this. I mean, what is the definition of deterioration? When I left, there was a leaky sink maybe, and the roof was clearly deteriorated. Now, Dan Coffey said in a debate a month ago that Peach Investment had invested close to $200,000 replacing the roof. I'd say that's great. Yeah. And if they did that, that slowed whatever damage. But it also would have dramatically lowered their heating bill. So I was confused when...
Mr. Chairman, back to the question. My question was, why don't the properties in their current situation meet the criteria for deteriorated properties? You can write me that answer. I don't need it today, but that's the question in front of us at this point.
What is the definition of deterioration? Is that
There's 5 criteria that one of them has to be met.
Yes, and I'm suggesting that the criteria for deterioration is that it's lost its.
So 1235 should be changed. Is really what you're talking about.
I think it should be reviewed, frankly, before any new application.
My question's been answered.
Mr. Gottstein, there are no other questions. Thank you, sir, for coming forward. Anybody else wish to testify? Please come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a bar. It's not a theater. We're not applauding. These people are here to testify, and we're moving on. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Trainee, members of the Assembly. My name is Larry Cash, C-A-S-H. I'm the chairman and CEO of RIM Architects. I founded the company back in 1986. I also have known and still know the Joe and Maria and their family for way over 20 years. And I will say they are about integrity and they are about excellence. So what they do is well thought out and well prepared, and I want to say that I support this project. I did provide you a letter because I was not able to be here Tuesday night, so I was able to open up some time today, and I wanted to be here and support the project and encourage you to pass the ordinance. I'm also a very, very strong advocate for downtown. and have been for many years throughout my career, as well as the rest of Anchorage, but I've focused my volunteer time on supporting downtown initiatives. And so we need this sort of project to help revitalize downtown so that it can achieve its potential. It is underutilized, and, you know, we have deteriorated properties, as this one is, that need to be cleaned up.
Thank you, sir. There are no questions from Assembly members right now. Appreciate it. Anybody else wants to testify, please come forward. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Madden, M-A-D-D-E-N. For the purposes of full disclosure, I am a municipal employee with the Solid Waste Services Department. I'm here on my own time, my own dime, and I'm not expressing anybody's opinions but my own as a private citizen. I guess I've been involved with the Anchorage Regional Landfill as a consultant back when we were getting the permits for the site, as a consultant when we designed some of the first cells out there. And since 2006, I've been working as the chief engineer for Solid Waste Services and have been involved with all of the design and planning and construction of pretty much everything that's been built out there since that date. I also, during my career there, had the pleasure and privilege of being the director of the Solid Waste Services Department for about 5 years. And when I was the director, it seemed like at least monthly, if not weekly, a developer or a contractor or an organization would come to me and say, my project or my organization has great value or will bring great value to the municipality, and so I should have free tipping fees or very reduced tipping fees. And I've had the pleasure of knowing a fellow named Joel Grunwald. If you don't know who Joel is, he was the original director of Solid Waste Services and served the municipality for about 30 years, and he's still actually involved in some of the projects that I do. And he's also, I consider him a great friend and mentor. And I said, Joel, what do you do about things like that? And he said, as far as tipping fees goes, there's two things I'll tell you. The first is they should be fair, and the only way to be fair is to charge the same price to everybody. And that way, nobody feels like they're subsidizing anybody else. The other thing he told me was that if you start going into the giving free tipping fees or giving breaks on tipping fees to one party, it becomes very difficult to say no to the next party. And so basically you end up opening Pandora's box. Where can you stop? And I think Mr. Wolfert made the comment the other night about I think he was talking about tax breaks, but he said when you start getting into deciding, well, this party deserves a break, but this party doesn't, you start to get into that cloud of corruption. And is it necessarily real or just perceived? Doesn't matter. It's easier to just avoid it in its entirety. When I looked at this ordinance, I see two things, and I have two suggestions for it. First of all, as far as the $200,000 goes, obviously my first preference is that it goes away. But anyway, wow, that went fast. Anyway,
it does.
Just to sum things up, I really, obviously my position is that we really shouldn't be giving away very, very valuable landfill space. As Central Recycling can tell you, it's very hard to get more back. And I think that while I very much support the project, I think that it could be done without the tipping fee.
But we have lots of questions for you, sir. Okay. Ms. Johnston has the first one. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
We've gone down this road quite a few times, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
So my first question to you is, have you subsidized any of the hauling away as far as Port Warren's off?
No, we have not, that I know of. Well, we, Solid Waste, did not. As I understand it, and this is after my tenure, so I can only talk in terms of what I've gleaned, but I wasn't involved with it. But it's my understanding that we were reimbursed by HLB for what came to the landfill.
So So the city ended up paying solid waste services for whatever was taken from a site that we had huge issues with, correct?
As far as I say, that was after my time, so I don't know that for 100%
Okay,
sure
I'll,
that's
I'll
true.
ask
But
that question later in the debate.
But I'll for the sake of the discussion, say that I've heard that is true.
Okay, and I'll ask the administration when it comes time for debate, but since that was our last run on this, I just thought I should ask.
But the other thing to remember, though, is that the Solid Waste Service Department is basically a separate entity, and the idea that the landfill space did get paid for is very important to understand.
Right, and we had been discussing in that case the tipping fees.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, no, we didn't waive the tipping fees. We charged the tipping fees, but we Solid Waste was paid for our tipping fees.
Right.
Yes.
Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize in advance for my comment, but I'm going to make it anyway. Mr. Madden, I appreciate your knowledge that you bring to the table. We've had many discussions, and I recognize your knowledge of solid waste services, but I feel your comments equating potentially giving somebody a tipping fee reduction, I feel your comments regarding the potential of waiving somebody's tipping fee and equating that with corruption is inappropriate.
It wasn't intended to be inappropriate, but you have to think about it that when you have one entity over here saying, well, hey,
Mr. Madden,
why don't I get that? Excuse me?
Can I finish?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The only thing I would say from a solid waste services perspective, as an assembly perspective, what we're looking at, you're looking at it through the prism of solid waste services, and I understand that and the impact and potentially giving breaks in the future. What we have to consider as a body is, and we haven't debated that yet, but what we have to consider as a body is the offset of those tipping fees in the long term a bigger community benefit by giving those and potentially having this development go forward. So we are looking at it as a community at large. What is the benefit? Not just solid waste services. So I appreciate your comments, but I want you to know that has not been ascertained yet. And the other thing I would like to mention is in Mr. Fang's testimony on Tuesday night, he had mentioned that wasn't a deal breaker for him, and there was discussion among members of potentially lowering that to 30 or 50,000 versus the 200. So I just wanted you to have that information.
Oh, and I appreciate that. But my big concern is that if you don't, all that we have is a landfill operator to sell his space. And once you sell that space, that's all the money you'll ever get to develop it. So.
Mr. Madden prefaced the conversation that these were his personal opinions, and I believe he's starting to drift into representation. Representation of solid waste services.
No, sir.
Mr. Madden, right here.
Yes,
Thank you for your service to the community as working with solid waste and this municipal government for all these years. I guess my question, and Mr. Bosky handled, I think, addressed the issue of what Mr. Fang had actually stated, which is it's not a deal breaker, and we haven't decided that phase 2, if you will, what those terms, if that, may be. Mm-hmm. So those are things that will be forthcoming, and may be that there isn't any. So that's one thing to consider. Secondly is we're kind of in Anchorage anyway. We're in a mostly redevelopment stage, and so I kind of forecast and see in the future much more issues coming forward with projects because something's going to have to come down in order for redevelopment to occur. So, I kind of forecast seeing things more, even a better structure going forward. So that's just a comment. And then lastly, I would say the same thing. It's to say that, we develop code ordinances and amendments all the time on a case-by-case basis, and I don't foresee that. I don't really view that as something where we're giving one person's a benefit over another. As anywhere close to anything coming to corruption. So I recognize you're just repeating what Mr. Wolfer said. I'm just saying I do also take a little umbrage to that. I don't really see that as that case. I think we look at each individual issue as it is, and we apply what we know and what we think is fair, and I think that's the standard that I use. I can't speak for my colleagues, but thank you.
Rung, thanks for being here, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Stuart Jakes. The last name is spelled Jacqueus. I'm neither particularly erudite or loquacious, so please be patient. I've lived in Anchorage for almost 35 years, and I want to state right off the bat that I'm in favor of this ordinance passing. We need to revitalize the downtown of Anchorage. What I've seen right now is what we've seen across the country, where the business community is moving out of the downtown. Midtown's developing aggressively. Our retail has moved out to the malls. We'll find ourselves in 15 years begging somebody like Mr. Fang to come in and put in a development in downtown. We need the development downtown to make our city vibrant 12 months out of the year, not 6 months out of the year that we have during the tourist season. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chair, but I believe that Peach has the right to demolish. As the owner of the property, they have the right to demolish that building with no further assembly input or approval if this ordinance is not approved. I believe that's correct.
That's correct.
So I look at that and say, everybody's talked about all the other things that could have been done or can be done with the building, but Peach is the one who stepped up when this came to auction or foreclosure, and they bought it. Nobody else stepped up and bought it. Everybody had the opportunity. It was a public auction. The community has made it clear that they're not willing to spend the money to purchase the theater, and I think the city would be going down a very slippery slope to affect eminent domain and try to take the property over. Based on what criteria? So anyway, unless the municipal code is revised, Peach has the right, as I understand it, to demolish the existing building and build a new building and save all or part of the theater as they see fit. So if that's the case, then I guess I can't understand why most of these people that are here aren't supporting this ordinance. This is the only way that I see that they have any right through their elected assembly members to participate in having any input into this development. I believe I'm correct in that assumption. I didn't say that it's the best way, but this way, as I understand it, it's the only way. So, on the other hand, if the assembly places too many restrictions on the developer, then, such as restoring the entire theater back to original condition type of thing, then that becomes economically unfeasible for the developer. And at some point, the benefit they receive from this will overcome the cost of that, and again, they'll just demolish the theater and move on. So again, for everybody here, I believe supporting this is to their best advantage. And I reviewed the code for deteriorated properties, and I understand that as long as
time's up.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Do you have a summary on what you're trying to do?
Well, yeah, as I understand it, because I think it hits the issue that even Mr. Madden was talking about. If a candidate meets the criteria of the code, then they are allowed this incentive. So this concept of that somehow there's a preferential treatment, I don't believe is correct either. You either meet the criteria which is established by the ordinance, or you don't.
I had a quick follow-up, too. Could you spell your first name? Because Stuart's spelled different ways.
Oh, it's S-T-U-A-R-T.
Okay, that's how I had it written. Thank you.
Okay.
Sir, thank you for your testimony. There are no other questions. Welcome to the meeting, ma'am. Oh, Bill popped. Oh, you're going to let me go first. Sorry,
Thanks.
Bill. Mark, welcome, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Stormy Jarvis, and that's Stormy with a Y, and Jarvis is Jarvis. I was born and raised in Anchorage, and the last movie I saw at the 4th Avenue Theater was The Ghostbusters. I have 2 degrees from UAA. I choose to live in Anchorage. I work here, I volunteer here, and I play very hard here. For the last 20 years, I've been involved in commercial real estate development and redevelopment in Anchorage. And I'd like to talk to you about supporting this ordinance and some things that I think you should know. When private investors choose to invest in Anchorage, they evaluate other opportunities across the country and the globe. And so this particular opportunity for Anchorage is a way for us to make the case to invest here. and to encourage other developers and property owners to invest here as well. Because quite frankly, they can make more money in other places than here. I've looked. You need to please consider how incentives and collaboration make our city more competitive, and make sure that we are a serious consideration for investment and not just a discussion point and an easy no. A 2014 publication by the Urban Land Institute called Infrastructure is Shaping the Competitive City. It discusses specifically how the most successful approach to infrastructure investment is cooperation and collaboration between private developers and investors and the government. As everybody knows, our rental prices and our property purchase prices in the city, both on the residential and commercial side, are astronomical. And I believe that one thing that contributes to that, especially when it comes to new development, is that we are, as developers, are required to invest in public infrastructure. So these things are roads and sidewalks, utilidors, traffic impact analyses, traffic lights and signals. And not only do the developers have to become experts with their contractors in these things, we have to pay for them and include them in the cost of the project. So then that's reflected in your rental fees, that's reflected in your cost per square foot for a buyer, say, if they're going to buy into a project. And that increases costs and then continues to increase over time. And now we are where we are now. Other cities across the country pay for these things, looking at it as a long-term investment for their city, not just this deal. And you pick winners and losers sometimes by, in a plan, improving a street. And I'd like to summarize that, private investment, government incentives, and rational processes are just grease to make the machine work. And when neighborhoods are revitalized, it all begins one project at a time.
And we've got one question for you. Mr. Holman?
Really more of a comment. I know you seem like you're a bit nervous, probably don't do a lot of public speaking, but you did wonderful. Secondly, as we graduate some seniors here, and we always we hope that we can maintain our best and brightest, and congratulations on staying through the UAA and just continuing to serve in our community with your education, and you seem like you're a very learned person. So again, thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Pop, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bill Popp. Last name is spelled P-O-P-P. I'm President and CEO of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. Members of the Assembly, it's a pleasure to address you today. I step up today to speak in favor of passage of the ordinance before you on behalf of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. What you have today is the first step in a very long process, and this is a process that is being done across the United States on a daily basis. Incentivization is an accepted practice. It has guidelines that the municipality of Anchorage is definitely conforming to. What are the community aspirations? What are the goals? What are the development goals of the municipality in which the incentives are placed? What are the agreement points between the proposed developer and the municipality? And then making sure that those agreements are clearly set out so that both parties know the path forward. Today is the first step in developing that process. It has not laid out the details of the agreement yet. It is merely stating that under the precepts of the city's municipal code, this is the first step forward into a rather in-depth negotiation between the municipality and Peach Investments, with many agreements yet to be developed, a series of incentivizations with a series of responses from the developer in terms of what the municipality gets. On the face of it, the municipality gets potentially up to $200 million worth of investment in our community in a time when I think $200 million worth of investment is going to be very difficult to come by in the next few years. We all know the challenges our state faces. This is very similar to the Projects 80s development that did help carry us through to a degree in the 1980s. This is a significant opportunity, but also a significant risk to the developers who are stepping up in a time when most other developers would shy away from a development of this size. So I would put forward to the Assembly that this is an opportunity to enter into a negotiation, to come up with an agreement that meets the development goals of the municipality, and to plant a flag squarely in the middle of downtown Anchorage, that we want a vital, revitalized downtown that is the core of our center, a vibrant core of our community, and that sets forth the very basic premise that we are looking for partners to make sure that our city progresses into the future. Thank you for the opportunity to address you, and again, we do support the passage of this ordinance.
Mr. Pop, we've got a question for you. Mr. Starr, sir?
Well, not anything more than that, just for accuracy, any agreements or tax abatement strategies also come back to this body once negotiated for approval.
That's correct.
That's right. Thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
your clarity.
Yes, that's my understanding of the code.
That's true. It would be factual. So
Thank you, sir, for your
thank
testimony.
you for your
Appreciate
clarity.
it. No other questions.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly.
How many people still wish to testify? I need to get a count. Okay, come on down. There's lots of space. You can't be last. I will bring this down and end the meeting if you don't get down here. I'm not as nice and kind as Elby was. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Chairman Traney, members of the Assembly, for hearing testimony today on the 4th Avenue Theater ordinance up here in question. My name is Kelly Walters, Kellywalters. I've watched with great interest. Tuesday night I couldn't be here, and today trying to get off work to come in and speak my mind a little bit. What I've heard, the bulk of the public seems to me is absolutely against the destruction or even the preservation of just the facade of the 4th Avenue Theater. And like folks have spoken about before, I'm concerned about the speed of this. It just seems a little untimely, and I think we just had an election, and in that election it turns out that Mayor-elect Berkowitz won more votes than any previous mayor going back 20 years. I would say that's a mandate, and I would, for one, like this process to slow down till at least Mayor-elect Berkowitz is sworn in July 1st. I mean, I think the people soundly rejected the politics of division, the politics of rush, whether it's the rush for this mayor to take a check as the interim mayor before he was even sworn in the first time, or whether it's the rush to take a $197,000 insurance trust settlement for a non-existent contract that is yet to be produced, or it's the rush on AO 37. People said no, 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 and I think this is along those lines. I, for one, don't want my property taxes to subsidize the destruction of a theater that has, like the architect, I think his name was Coons, testified on Tuesday evening, cities all over the country and the world are preserving historic properties, not rushing to destroy them or build up 28-story buildings with, rentals. I mean, who's going to live down there? So there's a lot of questions, and I, for one, would just like the process slowed down and deliberated a little bit more, and I do appreciate you taking the time to do this today. Thank you.
No questions. Thanks for being here, sir. Anybody else wish to testify?
Hello, my name is Justin Woolley, W-H-O-L-E-Y. I just had a couple things I wanted to say. I definitely support keeping the theater intact. As far as I feel like it's kind of a tax incentive to take down or disassemble a big part of the building. And I know in 2006 the voters voted to not approve a $2 million bond, and the amount of tax incentive that would be given to the developers would actually be significantly more than that potentially over the course of that 10 years. So I don't know if the city of Anchorage would want to subsidize this. I sent you all an email earlier today. This is just kind of, I don't know, pipe dreams or something, but I thought it'd be really nice if maybe it could be purchased. I know there's crowdfunding, all sorts of Kickstarter things that are happening. I know McMenamins they own 58 properties down in Seattle. I don't know if they'd be interested. Just kind of throwing some thoughts out there. There's a link to an article, and that's all I have to say, really. Thank you for your time.
There are no questions. Thank you for testifying, sir. Anyone else wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Welcome to the meeting, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Judy Bittner, B-I-T-T-N-E-R. I've been in the historic preservation business for about 30 years. My great-grandmother came to Anchorage in 1915 in Nome, built and bought a auction lot, and so our family has been here for the last 100 years. In addressing my comments to the AO 2015-49, I recommend that the Northern Lights Inn deteriorated property designation be separated from the downtown 4th Avenue deteriorated area designation. I believe the Northern Lights property meets that criteria, should be separated, and the focus on the redevelopment in that area. I do not believe the 4th Avenue Theater meets any of the criteria for the designated area, and I think the application of that 1235 is a misapplication and a misuse and a misunderstanding of that original ordinance. If the Assembly moves forward with the deteriorated designation of the 4th Avenue Theater and the other buildings there, I think the Assembly should, or the municipality should include in those, any document, including this ordinance, the expectations that they have for the developer of incorporating the historic part of the Lathrop building, which is the 4th Avenue Theater, into their development, and define a process where that negotiation or that consultation will take place between the municipality, the Historic Preservation Commission, and the developer. For this $20 million investment, it's imperative that they do require to incorporate what I think are some public values which have been expressed in the public hearing that people see in that National Register listed building. The whole process, I think, of determining the deteriorated areas and the tax abatement is going way too fast. It's kind of complex. I think it needs some deliberation and discussion, and I would hope that the Assembly would slow it down. The proposed concept of the commercial residential retail development, and it's a large area, and in my experience could and should require the design, incorporate that first floor cinema area into their Galleria retail space. I think it would be an attractive, marketable space and enhance what they're doing down there, and it's very doable. And there are a lot of examples. I think they could find them in San Francisco as well. A number of folks have addressed it and mentioned the Anchorage Downtown Comprehensive Plan. Reading that plan, I think there are many areas that support that. And if I could just finish the concept here, it's mentioned in a number of places, but I think what's important on this one is that it mentions the importance of mixing primary and secondary land uses in the downtown development, and states that secondary land uses augment primary uses, which is the new development, provide downtown with distinct destinations, services, activities, and workplaces. Without this mix, the goal of achieving a vibrant, mixed-use urban environment will be compromised.
Thank you, ma'am. There are no questions in the Assembly. Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? You coming down to testify, sir? Yes, sir. Okay. Over the meeting, sir.
Welcome. Thanks. My name is Seth Anderson. I am a civil engineer, downtown resident, and board member of Anchorage Historic Properties. I support the use of development incentives to encourage new development. Financial incentives are used to offset elevated construction costs associated with addressing deteriorated properties and costs associated with public infrastructure that is needed to be upgraded to support new developments. My understanding of the ordinance being considered today is designation of 2 areas as deteriorated and commitment to remove the Northern Lights Hotel. I have not heard opposition to designation of the hotel. However, I've heard many individuals challenge the designation of the Lathrop building. I spent a few hours this morning reviewing past studies, reports, and surveys of the 4th Avenue Theater, and it was quickly apparent that there is at least a 25-year history of foreclosure, ownership changes, life safety violations, and uneconomic viability of ventures at the theater. What I found is the building was built and owned 1947 through 67 by Cap Lathrop. Towards the end of his ownership, he sold it, realizing that distribution changes in movie theaters favored duplex and threeplex locations, and he saw a problem at the theater and decided to sell it. It was again sold in 1985, again because audiences seeing movies had dropped off. During the 80s, there were several owners and a long record of building safety violations, and in the end of the 90s, the then owner, Act 3, foreclosed on the property and left it with a long list of deficiencies, which are documented in MOA building safety reports. I found very little information about repairs and upgrades from 91 until a 2006 conditions assessment that the MOA had prepared as part of a public bond measure to purchase the building. The deficiencies, life safety, accessibility, and egress issues listed in the report are similar in nature to the deficiencies from the report in the 80s. When I was reviewing the past reports, I was also surprised to find several reports from the early 80s that the MOA had prepared when Tony Knowles was mayor. An early 80s report on preservation and landmark designation summarizes preservation in the central business district is not economically feasible due to rising land value, low return on investment with historic buildings, lack of local incentives. Another early 80s report on adaptive reuse recommends conversion of historic buildings to new useful functions so they can positively contribute to the economic base of the community. Yet another MOA report from 1982, the Preservation Coalition report, recommends that the MOA and the state work together with the owners of the Lathrop building and suggests the building be reused for office retail space. In summary, what I found is, one, there's a long troubled history of uneconomical ventures at the building. There's a long history of code violations at the building, and there's a long history of recommendations that the MOA use incentives to encourage development and economic growth, as well as acknowledgement by the MOA that a development in the central business district is tough financially. In closing, I hope that you will support this ordinance and look forward to receiving applications for specific projects in the future.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Evans has a question. Mr. Evans, sir.
Yeah, it's more of a brief comment. I certainly appreciate everyone that comes to testify on these issues. It takes time out of your day, and it's sometimes unnerving. But I really would like to say how much I appreciate those who come to testify who have also done, obviously, a lot of work in preparation of that. You've obviously done a lot of research on reports to get the background, and it's certainly helpful to us, and just wanted to say I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
No other questions. Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Anybody else wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? You say none, public testimony is closed. What's the body? Mr. Starr.
Move to approve 2015-49.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Starr moved it. Seconded by Mr. Evans.
I have first some
Starr and
just
Ms. Johnston.
general comments, and then I'd like to move into an amendment which I passed out, and I think we made enough copies if the public would like to get a couple of copies of that for that. But what I want to talk about is that, you know, the emotion and all of that is hugely important to me, as it was in the early years of my career here. I've been up here for a while. I've watched the voter initiative, the discussions on viable uses throughout our community. I've done my homework, and I think we really need to reach to a place where we are today. It's not to tread on the history, the memories, the historical aptitude as it relates to our community, but well, where are we today, acknowledging the realities of where we are today. I stayed way away from the blame game on where we got to where we're at. Why isn't the building viable? Why has it become such a place that would take many, many dollars to even become to a viable use of whatever definition? You know, there's a prescribed process, you know, surrounding the question in front of the Assembly, and it's not to say that it's hard for the public to understand that, but the question now focuses in on us as it relates to the question in front of us is, should the section of 1235 embedded into our charter and our code language, should that be a tool for a redevelopment as requested by these folks come to us? So I think the property needs to be measured by what's in our code, and it's a deference. It's not a hide behind the law. It's a use of the law. In and on page 1, of course, is the 5 criteria. What has to be met is just one of those. A little dissimilar to some of the oversight requirements that I experienced on planning and zoning, where you had to meet all of them or other prescriptive criteria. So in our case, we really have only to make the measure of the criteria are one of those met. When we do that, it initiates the very next steps, which are very cautious. Mr. Potter relevated it to the standing in line at the DMV. The first step is that what this does is it effectively allows for the folks to move to the formal submittal, stating their case negotiating the terms and conditions, moving through a prescriptive nature that's prescribed in 1235, a negotiation with the other side of government. Mr. Walters talks about sort of that being the motivation over there. What has to be known now is that I think you're seeing good government at work. We're going to prescribe 1235 be used. We're going to authorize, I hope, that I'm speaking in support, that the executive branch then go off through the prescriptive nature of the CFO, negotiate those agreements. I think that the primary submittal of the application is where that stuff starts to gel. The concerns and the focal points that I've heard become those operating agreements, become those letters of agreements, become that understanding, and quite frankly then become that entire package that comes back in front of us. The executive branch negotiates it as an executive branch should, and they bring it back to us. Does it meet the muster? Does the agreement make sense for our city? Some of the things that Ms. Dembowski talked about. Does it balance that out? Would tipping fees be associated? All of that can come back inside the memorandum of agreement. So as I lead into the amendment, I'd prefer to move the amendment in one chunk, partly because the elements are all sort of tied together. So I do, in fact, move the handed out amendment. And Mr. Chairman, would you like me to read the entire thing?
If you would, sir.
I certainly can.
Second.
The proposed amendment to AO 2015-49 as submitted reads, and some of it's technically speaking, and that's not the amendment, but you have to understand that it corrects various elements of this, and it's not to speak out of turn, it's to be very specific. It deletes the whereas clause on lines 5 and 10 on page 2 and replace it with two whereas clauses. Whereas, based on information provided by the property owners and the historic records of the MOA, the Assembly has established a deteriorated, unsafe condition of the former 4th Avenue Theater. Its vacant condition over the past 20 years, the failed results of the 2006 ballot initiative to acquire and restore the theater, and its current underused, economically undesirable land use, and find that such facts support including this property within the boundaries of the deteriorated area. Whereas, based on information provided by the property owner, the Assembly has established the Reed Building also contains partially vacant, economically undesirable land uses given its location in the downtown district, and thus qualifies it to be included within the boundaries of the deteriorated areas. Whereas, correction, add a new whereas clause on page 3, line 4 that reads, whereas the detailed information set forth in the accompanying Assembly memorandum, the AM, and attached exhibits are incorporated as fully set forth herein, including Exhibit D in its entirety, and I believe that is the assessment report dated in 2006. Add a Section 8 as follows. Section 8, the property owners shall file an application with the CFO for the property described in Section 1, requesting tax exemptions and or tax deferrals under AMC Chapter 1235, not later than September 30th of 2015, which includes an explanation of the timing for any requested tax deferrals and tax exemptions. During the CFO's review process, the property owner shall negotiate and enter into a memorandum of agreement with the municipality to identify the elements of a development agreement to be entered into between the property owners and the municipality before construction commences. The development agreement will address the topics including the following. Number 1, a public site plan process before the Planning and Zoning Commission. It will also address, number 2, the Anchorage Historic Preservation Commission's role consistent with AMC 4.60.030. Thirdly, preservation, restoration, recreation of economically feasible elements of the 4th Avenue Theater building into the project. And 4, lastly, it will the methods to incorporate public spaces, including airspace, into the process. And then there's a renumbering requirement of Section 8 on line 41, page 5, Section 9. I'd like that amendment to be in front of the body for consideration. I also want to speak to the amendment, if you don't mind. I know I'm hogging the microphone, but I'll be quick on this. The amendment, in my opinion, not only clarifies the record on the whereas statements to sort of neutralize the blame, but as we move into the verifying clauses in Section 8, it talks about things that are somewhat discussed in the public input for certain. I heard those loud and clear, but it also puts a firm timeline not only to this administration but to the next one. It uses the prescription based in 1235 of the CFO. We really can't get out of that law. But it prescribes a process that is equally understood and negotiated on what the developer can expect at planning and zoning and the various boards and commissions throughout that. And I think finally it does, in fact, return a municipality agreement signed and agreed by all parties that would put all of those previous clauses in there, the role of the historic preservation, the public site process review, and hopefully some sort of preliminary designs reviewed by the department and the community development department. So I think lastly, the protection angle is got to be re-mentioned in here, that if we can go ahead and get to the next step, I think the application, the executive branch work, will bring that back to us. September 30th is the latest that the developer could tender that application. By code, you should be knowing that the CFO has 90 days that is allowable to process that application. That's all I have on the amendment. I'll speak to the final matter if we can pass.
Thank you. I'm going to set the timer at 60 minutes for this entire thing. Ms. Johnson, on the amendment in front of us, ma'am?
No, mine's general.
Okay. Mr. Honeman, the amendment in front of us, sir.
Mine is also general.
Mr. Flynn, on the amendment in front of us.
Wait, sir.
Okay. Mr. Evans, on the amendment in front of us.
Actually, yes. I was just curious what the role of the Anchorage Historical Preservation Commission is. It cites the code. I just don't have the code in front of me. I don't know if Mr. Wheeler can give me just a quick summary of that.
That's fair, sure. I didn't want to necessarily place emphasis on that, but I think.
Through the chair, Mr. Evans, the commission is authorized under our Title IV, like other boards and commissions. The purpose statement is that the commission is there to encourage and further the interests of historic preservation by identifying, protecting, and interpreting the municipality's significant historic and cultural resources for the economic and social benefit of the community.
I guess my emphasis, and I didn't mean to speak through the chair, was that it become part of the memorandum of agreement, that conversation occur between the developers. I think that there's a certain role that they should play. I'd like to see that spelled out in the memorandum of agreement that comes back to us. Just what they will do.
Yeah, as long as the role they're going to play is spelled out in a subsequent memorandum, I just wanted to make sure that this language in this particular amendment was not necessarily affording them any rights that would be. I heard testimony from them asking for the right to deny things, and I want to make sure we just don't go down that path.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnson, on this amendment, or do you want me? I'll come back and pick you up. Ms. Dombrowski, on the amendment, ma'am?
I just want to say I support the amendment.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler, your lights on the amendment, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify for the record, in your packet handed out Tuesday night was this large document labeled
This
Exhibit
document,
D.
Mr. Wheeler.
This replaces the original Exhibit D that you had in your packet. The original exhibit was short, the total number of pages, so this corrects that problem.
That was in here. It's made right. Let's see, right there. This proposed amendment that he read earlier. It brings Section D. It brings Exhibit D into it. Its entirety. This thing. It's part of the document. Okay. Any other comments on this amendment? Okay. Then let's vote on it. Mr. Hall and Miss Margaret Jackson?
Yes.
Okay. That document is approved. We now have 2015-49 as amended in front of us. Ms. Johnston, ma'am?
Yes, I hate to. Could somebody representing the Fangs please come up? I have a couple more questions. Actually, yeah. I'd like to see someone from the family also. Thank you.
Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On Tuesday night, I got the impression that you've already started looking into the Northern Lights and that deteriorated property. What is your timeline as far as the Northern Lights building?
I would say the demolition of that would be sometime this summer, hopefully before the end of the year.
So you want us, one of the reasons that there's an interest from your family to deal with this earlier rather than later. Is that because of the Northern Lights building?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My other question, when you looked at using this as a way of getting some tax abatement, are you considering the tax abatement as a means for you to preserve or protect as much of the Fourth Avenue Theater as possible? Are you looking because you were looking at, because otherwise your development is a development that is just that, it's a downtown development. But do you feel that the tax abatement is what allows you to redevelop in a way that you can protect part of the Fourth Avenue Theater?
Simple answer is no. The project, any kind of a sizable project downtown, we figured would be somewhere between 100 million to 200 million. And without any kind of assistance at all, the return on investment is at best maybe 1 or 2%. And this is the reason why nobody has really invested in any kind of sizable project downtown for the last 15 years. The tax abatement, tax deferment will help, but it will not make the project.
So when you're saying 1 or 2%, and what's the term over how many years?
We take a very long-term view on investments. Typically, our building at 188, for instance, which we finished about 6 years ago, is just now beginning to break even. So my guess on this project is that it's going to take longer than that.
And so are you, but I guess what I'm asking, are you amortizing the 1 or 2% return on investment over a 30-year period, or once the tax abatement, maybe if it's a 10-year negotiated tax abatement, after that you still feel you only get 1 to 2% return on investment?
No, it takes a certain amount of time to reach stability.
Mm-hmm.
You have to rent the property out, retail, residence, and whatever you build it. And I'm saying it's going to take about at least 5 to 6 years to reach stability. And at that point in time, we should be able to see about maybe a 5% return.
Okay, so you are sort of amortizing that over a period of time, the 1 or 2% return?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's I'm ready to speak to the, if that's all right.
One working, sorry.
I came today really not knowing what I was going to do. I was actually thinking of bifurcating, because only reason I was thinking of bifurcating the two issues is because in terms of deteriorated property, Northern Lights is definitely a deteriorated property. And I was of the understanding from the FANGs on Tuesday night and again today that they tend to address that, or their intentions are to do that quickly. And I think the community as a whole would like them to do that quickly. The Fourth Avenue Theater is something that's not going to happen overnight or even this year or next year, I would think. I think it's going to be quite a process, a long process. And it's not asking for one deteriorated property, which is what the Northern Lights is. It's taking some deteriorated properties, combining it with parking or open space, combining it with, right now, an office building that is A-B type office space. And so it's a different type of approach to code. And so I was thinking as I was walking in today, I was going to bifurcate and make that motion. I can tell if I made that motion, I probably would not get a second. So I guess I'm not going to waste anybody's time, but I think we need to think about this, because even though we are leveraging, and that's what we're doing, we're leveraging one property against the other, I do feel that we are actually also, perception is everything. And I almost feel like we're putting the FANGs in a very difficult position, because it's making it look like we are rushing something. And And when it looks like you're rushing something, even if that's not the intention, perception is 80%. And I just wish all of you might think about this. I think there's a lot in what the FANGs are offering that is worthwhile. I do not want this process rushed with the administration. I do not care if, as I said Tuesday night, as far as I see, this current administration is an administration of transition. It's not an administration to get their last-minute projects done. So I have really not a lot of interest in this being handled quickly. I want it to be handled well, because it is a reflection on each of us sitting up here. We are the ones that are not only in transition, we are here into the next administration. And I want to remind you, no matter how you voted for this mayor's campaign was private-public partnerships. So if this is your interest, and if this is the public policy you want to set, I think you have no reason. I mean, I like Mr. Starr's amendments. I like the September 30th date, because if there was an intent to rush this, and there was intent to sell the tax abatement, he's kind of hit the nice, easy mark. He's set it out far enough, but not too far. But please, I mean, I think we heard a lot from the community that if we are going to do this, we are going to do this well. I do hope my last year, my intention is to bring to the body an ordinance that gives us a formula-based tax abatement program that we can use throughout the city. So it's just because you're doing a development in the city doesn't mean you need tax abatement. So that, I guess those are my words. I will not make the motion to bifurcate because I won't have a second, but I just hope everybody thinks about it.
Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, a couple of small amendments. Starting on page 4. On line 35, I'd like to delete the words "weather permitting" and the associated commas. I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded.
And, if we're going to give them, 2.5 years to do demolition, I don't think weather's going to be an issue. That's all.
Ask unanimous. Should no objection. Do you want me to vote on it? Okay, because we got people out here. Ms. Jackson and Mr. Hall.
Yes. Yes.
Please vote. That is accomplished. Next one, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next page, page 5, on line 4, I'd like to reduce 60,000 to 12,500.
Second.
Well, I'm not quite done, Mr. Honeman, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. And on page 11, or sorry, line 11, 200,000 to 50,000.
Second.
Let's move to the second discussion from Assembly members on that amendment.
Just real quickly, that reflects the conversation I had with Mr. Fang Tuesday, and I think that's I'm nervous about including this at all, frankly, but if we're going to do it, let's confine it.
Discussion from Assembly members on the amendment. See no discussion. Mr. Hall, Ms. Gray Jackson on this amendment.
Yes.
Okay. Please vote. That's approved. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, sir. This is one of those wonderful issues where it doesn't matter how I vote, I'm going to tick off at least half of my friends. I don't know that I have the most history with the 4th Avenue Theater of anybody in the body, but I have quite a bit. I went to movies there as a kid, saw Footloose and Ghostbusters. My sister, when the PAC was under construction, acted in a play at the 4th Avenue Theater when it was the replacement for the Sidney Lawrence Auditorium. I had an office in the basement in 1994. That is not an historically aesthetic portion of the building, if anyone's wondering. And it's my neighbor. I work across the alley, so I look at that theater every day. I think the Fengs are proven to be very good developers in our community, and I appreciate their participation in our community. I take them at their word that they're going to do their best to maintain as many of the historic elements as they can, presuming this project moves forward. And I'll probably harass them a little bit about that as this marches on. But then I want to get, if you'll allow me a moment to wax a little bit philosophical, I don't like 1235. Never have. When I first ran for office, a prominent local developer asked me to come meet with her, and she asked me about the tax abatement process. And I said, I don't think it works. I think it's the wrong model. Because the way it's built, we essentially require the developer to get control over the land they want to redevelop and then get the deteriorated property finding. It can't help but look like we're cutting a special deal. There's no way it doesn't look like that. And so that's why you saw when I brought forth the Fairview Ordinance, we say this area is deteriorated. If you're in it, you can come to us for a break, but we're not designating it for one owner. And I'm honestly not sure how I'm going to vote on this, because I do want to see redevelopment downtown. This is an area I care about. I mean, this little, from 4th Avenue to 5th Avenue on G Street is the best little neighborhood in Anchorage. There's businesses, there's offices, there's residences, and it feels like a neighborhood in a way that almost no other part of Anchorage does. And I love working there, and I think this could enhance it. But my philosophical problem with 1235 makes it very difficult for me to contemplate voting for an abatement under that current code. So I'll wait a few minutes before I decide what I'm going to do, but I hope people understand. I think there's a lot of potential here, but I'm really troubled by the way the process has been set up by our predecessors. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Well, you have 43 minutes more to pine on this, sir. Mr. Evans, on the document as amended in front of us, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, we've gotten a lot of testimony from a lot of people who are very interested in this issue, they're very passionate about this issue. All the people that testified and a lot of the emails we've got, which are, I think, more than for most issues we deal with. And a lot of support for this theater, restoring it, keeping it alive, making it something that is consistent with its past. And I think all that's a good thing. I mean, I am a history major. I'm a history nut. I'm the guy that drags his kids to the Warren Harding Presidential Home and Museum when they're little kids. I truly respect and appreciate the importance of preserving our history. And like so many of the people said, we have very limited history of that nature in Anchorage, so it makes it all the more important. But to some degree, this issue has been kind of framed as pitting Anchorage's past versus Anchorage's future. When I saw the project that the Fangs Peach Investment had proposed, I was incredibly excited. I haven't seen anything like that even being put forward for Anchorage as long as I've been here. For those who testified about it being an 18-story gray building downtown, they obviously haven't looked at what is being proposed, the totality of that project, the Galleria. When I heard from them, they were talking about modeling it sort of on Pike's Market, with, having this kind of iconic new center of Anchorage that it will sort of define Anchorage. 50 years from now, this will be the historic property that we're trying to protect. And I think Mr. Jakes, I believe his name was, who testified today, hit the nail on the head for me. I think the only way we really do preserve anything of the Fourth Avenue Theater is through this process. Because, as Mr. Jake stated, the Fangs have the right to tear this down tomorrow without our approval. It's their property. The tax incentives that we're talking about are mischaracterized by some people. We're not providing tax incentives to tear down the building. We're providing a tax incentive program, if we go that far, that provides abatement on a future building, on future value that is added. If nothing's ever added, if it's just torn down and it's a vacant lot, there is no tax benefit because there is no enhancement. So I support this project. I support it because I think it is the best way to blend historic Anchorage with future Anchorage. I think there are elements of that theater that are worth preserving. I don't see that there's any real practical way of realistically ever making that a theater again. I just don't see it. That you can raise all the money you want, but you don't own the theater. And as far as I know, it's not for sale. So you just don't have that option that you'd like. And we're not going to condemn it and take it over by the city because there's no basis for doing that to private property. So I think while it may not completely please everybody who has such fond memories of the theater, I think the important thing that we can do is preserve elements of it so that this new development, which is going to be, if it goes forward, and you never know if these things will work out, but if it goes forward, I think it redefines downtown Anchorage, and in a way, by incorporating a lot of those elements for the Fourth Avenue Theater, pays honor to Anchorage's past. So I'm going to be a strong proponent of it. I agree with Mr. Flynn and Ms. Johnston to a degree that this particular mechanism that we have is not ideal. I wish we had a better mechanism for providing the incentives for development that we see here, but we don't. And we have a development authority in town that, is not necessarily adequately focused on actual development. We need to do that better. I think Mr. Gottstein's point about us doing that better is correct. We need a different mechanism. Ms. Johnston keeps promising to get that to us before she leaves, and I hope she will, because I think there should be development and incentives for development even on properties that aren't deteriorated. I think Mr. Honeman said it really well earlier that we're in a phase in Anchorage where redevelopment is going to be more important than development. We're out of kind of space, and we're talking about refurbishing a lot of areas. So even though it's not the best mechanism, I think it is the best mechanism we currently have, and I would hate to see this project somehow slip through our fingers like so many tend to do simply because we, reject the good for the excellent. So I support the project.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hall, sir. On the item in front of us, we've got 37 minutes left.
Everyone has said this very eloquently. I will be supporting it, and I'm not going to take up any time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman and Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Honeman?
Well, again, most everybody and my colleagues can speak first, covered a lot of the basis, and I do agree and concur with pretty much the sentiments everybody has. And I just want to highlight a few things for myself, and one is what Mr. Evans has said is Mr. Jakes was absolutely correct. It is the Fangs building, Peach Investment, and they, much like when I remodel my house, they don't need our permission to really redevelop, refurbish, or renovate that project, including taking it down, as much as that would break my heart. With nothing really solid, with a better project ahead. I, too, have not met the Fangs or Peach Investment movers that I know of. Before this project, I did speak with the representatives, and I will tell you my first guttural response was emotional, just like anybody else's that have been around this town for a while, and that is I have attended movies there. I've attended events, as I spoke to earlier. Won't go down to that. But I will ask that I believe that we need to make sure it's really clear that the Fangs are not at fault just because they want to develop projects. That's what they do. They invest around this world, around the country, and certainly in Alaska and Anchorage, and I appreciate that. I welcome your investments. I welcome the dollars. We do sorely need it. Mr. Pop addressed that earlier as we move forward as a community, and I know that you have invested well, and your projects seem to be well. I am concerned about Northern Lights Inn. I think it has been deteriorated for a lot of time, and so if this makes this move, I think this That's a very big positive to start. I'm going to ask you something on a personal level. Mr. Fang, you spoke and I spoke briefly. I don't know what it takes to move in this world of financing. It's a lot of money. And as you said, you're going to have to get people to come from outside to do it. And I don't know what that timeline is, but I asked a couple of things. And number one is that we'll consider the second phase at a later point. But before you do any movement to demolish the Fourth Avenue Theater as it exists, that I hope that you take the time prior to that to secure the financing so we'll know what kind of project you really have going forward. We have the proposal, but we don't have the actual plan yet. We see that. So I ask that you kind of consider that as a possibility. It gives the time for our community and the Historic Commission to work with you and on what things we have to preserve. And then lastly, in the redevelopment, we talked about the facade. We know that's the intent. I talked about the lobby, perhaps some of the mahogany or the nice stairwells, things like that, if that's possible. And I know that you've committed to that. So I ask that you also perhaps incorporate, I'm going to do my first pitch, establishing a section of the entry or the lobby, perhaps that could be a theater-like setting that gives homage to the Fourth Avenue Theater that stood in its place for historical purposes and time immemorial, and perhaps for local artists or Alaska films to be shown. That gives, again, some legacy continuity of the Fourth Avenue Theater. So if you can't save the lobby, if you can't save as much of the building as you can, consider that as particularly kind of a nice entry, welcoming for tourists and people that remember Fourth Avenue as it was. So I do support this, and I welcome the investment.
Ms. Gray Jackson, ma'am, on the document in front of us.
Mr. Chairman, how much time do we have left?
We have 34 minutes. Are you planning utilizing all of it?
Okay, yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. Just kidding. No, anyway, first I want to thank my colleagues because I think everything that everybody had to say on both sides set it off, frankly. So I just have a few things to say. First of all, when we were presented with this project some months ago by Agnew and Beck, my first reaction was, oh, wow, this is great. This is going to be really, really great for the community. But the old saying is very, very true. There's always two sides to every story, and we found that out based on all the emails that we all got from our community. I feel, though, that the amendments that were brought forward is a really good compromise. And based on the amendments, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move forward and approve this document. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Peterson, sir, on the document as amended in front of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if I could ask a question of the developer for just one quick question.
Mr. Fang, sir.
Thank you, sir, for being here today.
Yes.
I heard something in the testimony the other night that intrigued me, and I was hoping to get a commitment from you today to work with the Historical Preservation Commission to do whatever is possible to save as much of the theater that we can, so that we can please the citizens that grew up here in this community and have fond remembrances of their youth in the theater. Would you be willing to do that?
Yes, I think it's documented in the amendment, is it not?
Yes. Okay, I just wanted to get that on the record. And that was my only question. Thank you.
Mr. Peterson? Go ahead, sir.
And I actually had originally come here today with a plan to postpone this item, but because of the amendment, Mr. Starr has done such a fine job of writing, I think there's going to be enough time between now and September 30th for lots of public input on this issue. And so I'm not going to be asking to delay this. I think I am going to be a vote in favor of this. I'm like Mr. Flynn. I'm not too overly enthusiastic about this ordinance we have for tax abatement, and I'll be happy to see the new changes that Ms. Johnston presents to change that in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Starr, sir.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief here as I can. I don't know the Fangs except yesterday. So I put that out on the record, is that this isn't a good old boy club or corruptive nature of I'm doing a favor for anybody. I don't work that way. I bristled at that. It took me hours to get over it. I don't have any inference that it was ill-intended, but it makes me bristle because I'm up here for the right reasons. One of those reasons is that I understand charter and code. I work hard at making certain that everybody gets a fair shake. I think that like Ms. Johnston, in my specific critiques, I wish it was a little bit more district-driven in terms of that. It reminds me of spot zoning, where we pick on one area. However, I feel that was my first approach, was can't we just do this on the whole block? Because we are using that. That's probably not going to be practical here. There's some properties adjoining that may join on. I hope they do when they see the progress there, specifically the Cuddy family and the folks on that side. I feel that in any toolbox of a developer, you reach out to the people that you know are good at what they do. Not only are the Fangs probably good at what they do, but so are the Tim Potters of the world, so are the folks with the Agnew Becks. Those folks have a vested interest in our community. So the accountability on doing it well, I believe, is sort of already there. The checks and balances of government, as Mr. Walters had put to us last night in an email, which was effective. The executive branch is doing executive work and negotiating the agreements based on what we prescribed to them to do that. I have confidence in the way it's started. I purposely felt that as the Fangs choose, they can start the process now with the formal application, and it can be continued on. We also have the latitude of delay, Ms. Johnson. If it comes back to us and we don't like it, let's just do what we do sometimes. We kick it back. We say, make it better. Do it better. I feel that the systems of control in government are here, executive branch, legislative branch. I'm oftentimes frustrated by the bureaucracy of it all, and I think the Fangs will be frustrated by the bureaucracy of that. In elaborating a little bit more, Mr. Flynn, we have other development tools. We have Title 21 is an effective development tool. Overlay districts could be an effective development tool to motivate. Historic preservation districts. I think an efficient and perhaps a more streamlined building approval process could be a motivator and a development tool. That all of these things are in the toolbox of developers and strategists such as us. Legislators can use them. Developers can use them too. It's not a lecture, but I think we need to be cognizant that Title 21 can either be a burden or a motivator. Overlay districts, which we're using in our area for Eklutna, can be a preservation district as well as a downtown motivator for Eagle River District. Those are very effective, very specific tools related to us. 1235 is it's flexible for a reason. 1235 doesn't say you must do this. It was ill-equated by Mr. Potter that it's a step process. But I think the people that wrote this chart and wrote this code required the flexibility because every project is slightly different. Every motivation is slightly different. A redevelopment district perhaps is different than a preservation application or a financial application, or as Mr. Godstein would talk about, affordable housing motivations. So the flexibility, I think, is inherently there for a reason. It is complex, there's no question. Let the executive branch negotiate it. Let us decide policy when it comes back to us. Today is a safe answer for all of that, but I think we've tried to pull it into a business decision using effective business models and business methods and make that question come back to us in a policy statement later. Let the emotion come out. Then again, let the emotion come out of planning and zoning. Let those folks vested in it and are good at the Historic Preservation Commission do it. I'm happy with the amendment that it passed. I think people got it up here in particular. And again, without pontificating, I'm passionate about development, but I want my kids to live here too, and I want them to be excited about what we do as a downtown community, and this is a great jump start.
Mr. Steele, sir, the document is amended in front of us.
I guess I'm at the low end. I hit the button last.
There's others after.
Okay. First up, I want to thank Mr. Fang and the family and everybody. They were very accommodating in terms of letting us in the theater, let us to look around. It seems as though it is a fast process, but they've owned it for some time, and I'm sure that they have thought about what they wanted to do with it and its place in the city for a long time. And I'm sure that they understood through the testimony that that the Fourth Avenue Theater has a very real place in the hearts of Alaska, Anchorage people especially. But and it hurts when you drive by and it's not in the best of shape, the facade even and the sign, and we all know it's not being used. This particular proposal, however, is exciting. It does something that we need in Anchorage, and that is something exciting that gets people downtown. Right now, all the news that we get from downtown seems to be bar break, and Anchorage is a lot more than that. I have confidence that I like the amendments Mr. Starr came up with in terms of I think they strengthen the proposal, or what's before us. I empathize with Ms. Johnson's desire to try and bifurcate. I drive by the Fourth Avenue, the Northern Lights Inn at least twice a day, and I hope you don't wait until next summer to do it. It needs to be gone, and it certainly is well defined as a deteriorated property. Most people don't view the Fourth Avenue Theater, though, as that deteriorated. They want to save it. And so I'm excited to see what you come up with, how you interpret what you've heard, and make the economic decisions you have to make. So it will be a yes vote on it, and I don't necessarily want to drag it out. I know we're doing things for the right reason, but we do need to contemplate whatever we get back to look at it. So, thank you.
Ms. Dembowski, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think our time is running short, so I will be very quick.
No, you have 23 minutes and 57 seconds,
Oh, you
so
should
please
have
go
told me
on.
3. Like everyone else, I'll take 3 minutes. I want to say from the beginning, I saw this come forward, and I've been supportive of this from the beginning, from the first time I read it. I think it's a smart way to use tax abatements. I think it's an opportunity for the city of Anchorage to use this tool to develop our economy and to benefit the community at large. I want to echo some comments that Mr. Potter made. I loved the way you presented it. I'm not sure where you went to. Oh, there you are back there. But the point is, this is step one. So when we hear people say this is rushing the process, it's simply not true. This is step one. Then they have to go to an agreement with the CFO and the administration. It comes back to the assembly. The development has to go through P&Z. They have to have replats. They have to have conditional use permits. They have to have permit analysis. There's so many steps before they're actually going to be able to break ground. And throughout those steps of planning and zoning, there's multiple opportunities for public input. When the agreement comes back before the assembly, there's going to be probably opportunity for public testimony. So this isn't a rush in the step process. This is step one. I understand what Mr. Flynn's saying about not liking 1235, but frankly, that's what we have to deal with right now. And I'm not going to punish this developer because we have maybe not a perfect system in place right now. When I hear comments about public-private partnerships, I've heard a lot of people say that what happens inside matters to us, what we could do with it. I understand that, but I also understand this is private property. The Fangs own it. Peachtree Investments owns this piece of property. And whether they chose to tear it down or not, they have chose not to do that. They've chose to preserve as much of it as possible. But you have to recognize this is an economic decision, but it's one that they obviously have come to us willingly in the beginning and said they want to preserve as much of it as possible. So that, to me, speaks to not only their value of history, but their desire to involve the public and maintain what they know that the public loves as best that they can. When we talk about public-private partnerships, you know, the ballot initiative in 2006, you want to talk about a mandate or a landslide, it failed significantly. The municipality of Anchorage chose not to engage in a public-private partnership with the Fourth Avenue Theater. So we have to remember this is private property, and we have a developer that has a history of being responsible and a good steward to our community, and also a good partner. And for that, I'm thankful. But the other thing that I feel is necessary to address, I've heard multiple people testifying saying that by passing this potential abatement, that we are lowering Peachtree Investments property taxes and we're raising everyone else's. That's simply not true. We are not cutting their taxes. They will still pay the same taxes that they pay today. We are abating it. Abatement means essentially they will pay at a certain period in time the increased value of that property once it's completed and finished and the term is finished. It doesn't mean that they're going to cut their property taxes. But what that does give us the opportunity to do is it gives us the opportunity to broaden the tax base in the future. So we have a choice here. We have a developer that has come to the city of Anchorage and said we are willing to invest up to $200 million in your city. What that means, at the end of that abatement period, right now, if you look at the whole area, the property taxes are about $235,000. At the end of the abatement period, we have a potential revenue coming in from this area of $2 million. So what happens to that is we have just broadened the tax base. And in effect, it could actually lower everybody else's property taxes. And we have not subsidized it. We have not used other people's tax revenues in order to do that. Instead, all we've done is we've used a financing mechanism that, as Mr. Pop has pointed out, is used all over the country. In fact, in other areas of the country, they do use taxes of other people's to actually invest in these projects to get them going. We're not doing that here. We're leveraging private sector dollars in order to invest in our community, and I think that's a prudent way forward. So as I've said before, I support this project. I think it's a good project. I think there's opportunities to use these in a more robust manner moving forward. We're going to have to be creative when it comes to allowing developers to develop in our community, especially with the economic climate that we're facing. I think this is a good example of how that can be done. I appreciate it coming forward, and I look forward to voting yes.
Thank you, ma'am. There's nobody else left to speak, so I'm going to take a couple of minutes. Very few. I appreciate your family's dedication to the future of Anchorage. I guess we have some sound effects. But thanks for bringing this forward, because we want to see downtown building. And it's not been building for a long time. Because otherwise I've seen downtowns die across this country. And I don't want that to happen with downtown. And I appreciate the fact you're going to take that ugly building in Northern Lights down. Let me know when that thing's going to be imploded. I'll probably be watching you. So I look forward to this process going forward, and let's vote on it. Ms. Gray-Jackson and Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Yes.
That is approved 9-2.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Dembowski.
Mr. Evans, hold your breath.
I know.
Mr. Chairman, I move for immediate reconsideration and urge a no vote.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. No votes been urged. Mr. Evans, sir.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how extraordinarily bad a process that is. Not to go on, but in 1787, the Constitutional Convention, when they gathered in Philadelphia, the second rule they made in forming the Constitution was that anything that they did at the convention could be reconsidered, and it could be reconsidered a number of times. And if you read the records of that, they did, and it made a better process. Reconsideration is in place for a reason. It gives breadth to our decisions. We have it very limited as it is now. It requires you have to do it within 24 hours, but I think it's very important. And if we proceed in this manner, and I know you can do it, it's technically parliamentary appropriate, but I think it's rude to, we're not a 435-member body, we're 11 of us, and it's basically taking away that right from the rest of us. Interesting. But it's not a comment on anything. But we can also eliminate the consent agenda. And if we want to go down this path of playing these parliamentary tricks, I'll just pull everything off the consent agendas going forward. So I urge everybody now to vote yes to reconsider this, and we can deal with it. But if you want to vote no and go through this process, we can do that, and there'll be no more consent agendas, because we can do that also.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Starr, sir.
Well, I somewhat concur in the potential, and Mr. Evans didn't say this, but I concur with the potential to misuse the reconsideration process, because you perhaps convinced a fellow person that voted on the affirming side to change their mind and manipulate that process. My take, and when we reconsidered on planning and zoning, it was because something of vital nature was either not disclosed, or somebody in the audience says, well, did you know that they were, or did you know about this? So I guess my point on reconsideration the day after is literally because somebody brought to my attention substantial information that changed my mind. Not political, not games playing, not all the other stuff. So if we can all adhere to that, and I've been on this body now coming up on 8 years, we've sort of played along those rules. We haven't misused it. So, Mr. Evans, I appreciate your passion through the process of whatever. These folks have a lot of folks that are ready to go to work. And if we say May 26th or bringing it back or whatever, they're going to be going, well, there's one more thing we got to deal with. And I would rather not do that. So today I ask you for that. If we have to clarify the rules of process through the chairman's ruling later on reconsideration to prove up that you learned something substantial the next day, maybe that's what we have to do as a body to get along. But I'm still going to urge a no vote. Let these people go to work. They've got work to do and are ready to start spending money in our community.
Okay, the document in front of us is to reconsider. No vote's been urged. Mr. Hall, Ms. Gray Jackson.
No.
Ms. Gray Jackson. Okay. Please vote. That item will not be reconsidered by this body. The vote was 9-2 against reconsideration. Next item in front of us tonight, we're going to finish this. Yes, Mr. Hall. Let's see. Go, Mr. Hall. Enjoy yourself, sir. Thank you for participating by the phone.
And Mr. Chairman, before we continue, Mr. Evans, hopefully I can talk you out of that whole consent agenda thing.
Mr. Hall, I will argue with the Constitutional Convention was illegal the way it was structured. We had a functioning government under the Irish Confederation, and if you look at the document, it was an illegal revolution. No, we're not taking a recess. Item in front of us is item 14B, Resolution Air 2015-119, a resolution confirming and levying upon special assessment of Special Assessment District 0425 for sediment removal in Campbell Lake and setting the date of assessment, installment payments, interest on unpaid assessments, and providing for penalties and interest in the event of delinquency. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record, and spell your last name. Not seeing anyone. Public testimony is closed. What's wished?
Move to approve.
I need a second on it. Been moved and seconded. Mr. Starr, you're in line.
Well, I have a couple aspects of involvement on the process, and it's not to disclose a conflict, it's to describe my involvement. Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, if you listen in, if there's anything that crosses over the line. There's an item in here, 2011-17, which made a change to the appropriation for dredging of Campbell Lake. I had attended at the request of the homeowners board over there a meeting. They were concerned about how the process was going to take out the sediment in Campbell Lake. I know one of the board members of that. I went to their meetings. We talked about it. If you'll notice, they contributed an additional $150,000. I don't know that I could call being brokered that deal. Mr. Vikalis, who's since left, was pretty active in that, as well as the PM&E director, because the project was stalled, had a whole bunch of cluttered issues where the city wanted to do work and charge the homeowners. But in effect, I believe we sort of, and the fact that there was no public testimony describing their angst with this, I think that the homeowners, the city, and everybody's well treated. I take some point to disclose my involvement in 2011-17.
Sir, it's my opinion you do not have a conflict of interest. You're directed to participate in this.
My APOC report, finally, another disclosures. My APOC report, I show a close association with a homeowner, several of them on Campbell Lake. Campbell Lake reads as a who's who of Anchorage. So one of those homeowners is a client of mine. I don't feel like I'm given special treatment considering how many people are on this assessment list, but I have fully disclosed my relationship with that individual in multiple forms as well as this body before.
Thank you, sir. This body used to have an individual on it that lived on Campbell Lake, and I flew out in his plane quite a few times.
Yeah.
It's in his book that he writes. I think it was, "Oh God, I think I'm going to die." He and I were hunting.
I'm not embarrassed by my relationship with him, but I wouldn't want to infer that I've done anything to manipulate the cost. If anything, it's gone up. So in that case, I feel that I just put that on the record. I'm urging approval. Let's get on with this assessment. The work was well done and well received.
You're directed to vote on this, sir, by the chair. Mr. Wheeler, sir, your light's lit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Flynn has some
Okay,
date for you.
Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 amendments. Page 1, line 37, insert May 14th for the date of the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ask unanimous. See no objection, Madam Clerk. That's done. Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second amendment, page 2, lines 6 and 7, insert July in each blank space.
Second.
What year?
It's July of each year and then
Okay.
July 30, 2015.
Okay. Thank you, Pat.
And
That was moved and seconded by Mr. Horman. Was moved by Mr. Flynn, seconded by Mr. Horman. Anything else, Mr. Flynn?
That's it.
Is there any objection to that amendment? That's so ordered by the body, Madam Clerk. Is anybody left online still? Okay. Okay, ma'am. We're now going to vote on this item. We have in front of us 2015-119. Okay, hold on. Ms. Gray Jackson, you want to vote, please, ma'am? Okay. Please vote. Ms. Dembowski, ma'am, I need your vote. I was approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14E, Ordinance CO 2015-44, an ordinance authorizing a lease agreement between the Municipality of Anchorage and Worthington Properties of Alaska, LLC, for the Sealy Anchorage Police Department substation. And there's an accompanying AM with it, AM 552-2015. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing same one, public testimony is closed.
Move to approve.
Mr. Holdeman moved it and is seconded by Ms. Johnston. Thank you, ma'am. Discussion from Assembly members. Please vote. Ms. Gray Jackson. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14F, Ordinance 2015-47, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 25, to update sections reference former Department of Property and Facility Department Management, to remove the professional appraisal requirement for lease rental amount adjustments, to establish uniform findings of no substantial value for certain disposals with terms less than 1 year and less than $50,000, and amending Anchorage Municipal Code Regulations, Chapter 25.11, for the management of George M. Sullivan Arena. Thank you. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward and state your name clearly for the record. Anyone at all? Hearing saying none, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Been moved by Mr. Honeman, second by Ms. Johnston. Discussion from Assembly members. If not, please vote. Ms. Gray Jackson? Yes. Please vote. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14G, Ordinance AO 2015-48, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 25.45, rental tax on rental of motor vehicles to improve administrative effectiveness, clarify record retention requirements, clarify eligibility for refund of overpaid taxes. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name and clearly for the record. Anyone at all? Hearing saying no, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Hodeman, second by Ms. Johnston. Discussion from assembly members. Will now please vote. Ms. Gray Jackson? Yes. Please vote. That is approved by the body. Next item in front is item 14H, Resolution AR 2015-152, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage approving a master tax exempt lease purchase agreement loan and appropriating an amount not to exceed $26,600,000 of said loan proceeds to the Internal Service Fund 607 and the appropriation of those funds to the Capital Improvement Fund 608 for SAP implementation for the Finance Department. There's an AM with it, AM 281, 2015. It's now one for public testimony. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying none, public testimony is closed. What's the body?
Move to approve.
We'll need a second. I'm going to Ms. Johnston. We'll need a second on the motion to approve. From somebody? Mr. Holdeman moved it. Ms. Johnston seconded it.
I will
Thank you.
second it, but I'm going to amend it.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, I would like to, line 22, change it from 21.6 million and change it to 2.5 million.
Which page is your amendment on?
1. Right, 21 and 22.
Okay.
2.5 million. And then on line 25 and 26, again change the 21,600,000 to 2.5 million.
Is there a second on that amendment?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved by Ms. Johnston, second by Mr. Flynn. Ms. Johnston?
I'm not sure. I think, 1 second, I think Ms. Nabowski is correct. I need to go to line 25 on page 2. Again, changing the 21.6 to 2.5.
I concur with that addition, sir.
You got it, Madam Clerk? Okay. To speak to your amendment, Ms. Johnston?
We've had a lot of back and forth the last week or so, and we've also had 3 very good reports from our Assembly auditor, and I've taken them quite seriously and actually have been in communication with them. And I think you all saw before, I think it was Tuesday, he sent an email to the administration requesting a way of explaining their spreadsheets to such a way that we maybe can then feel comfortable as far as where this project is going and what we're actually appropriating money for. I have no intention of stopping the work. My only intent is to feel comfortable as we go forward that we're getting a full accounting and we know exactly what's happening. And so by having it at 2.5 million, I hope that gives the administration time to come back with spreadsheets, with timelines, with deliverables that we all can feel comfortable about because we are the transition between the 2 administrations. And so I would hope that 2.5 million would last a month. I looked at the burn rate, and I think it was a little over 200,000 a week. The Peloton contract that we approved on Tuesday night, I think was 2.6 million or 2.3 million. I'm talking off the top of my head right now because I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me. But so I feel I've hit something that does not stop the project, and I urge a vote. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Gaillard, can you live with what's being proposed?
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, no, you will stop the project.
Okay. Mr. Honeman.
That was part of the question. Mr. Jared, if there were to be an amendment for the master lease fund borrowing agreement currently, at what level could we operate without stopping the project?
Through the chair, Mr. Honeman, first of all, Mr. Zigg's comments were really the 2.5 million were only addressing one component of our request, which was the SAP QA.
Right.
So our total request of 21.6 million embodied an upgrade that must be started, and that upgrade cost is approximately $3.5 million. So we have come back to you many times with proposals showing you, introducing you to the team, trying to give you some sense of confidence that we are working in the right direction with this project. And we are just set to gear up, but you have approved approximately $8 million worth of contracts to Peloton, to SAP, that are not funded, that are approved but not funded. And I'm not really sure, I guess I feel like I'm a little bit at the end of my rope to try to continue to push momentum on this project, which you need to get through, and convince you that we are, as best that we can, doing our best to make sure we manage the money properly. So we've asked you for 21.6. You've asked me for what we can live with, and I put together a schedule, $14 million, and it'll be 4 or 5 months before we come back and ask you for more. But I would prefer the 21.6. I think we have done enough to prove to you that that money is needed for the momentum. We cannot staff up, because if we don't give contractors some sense that we're going to have money beyond a month, who wants to give us the best contractor? We'll get the second or third tier guys. And Mr. Novosel is here from SAP. Mr. Beggs is here from Peloton. I have to work with them every single month to say, okay, Mr. Peloton's living on vapor right now. And are they going to want another $500,000 to get through the next couple of weeks and then be willing to give us good contractors? I'm trying to manage this as best I can. We asked you for the 21.6. We gave you what I thought was a very good presentation, and we need you to commit to this project. We need that vote.
Ms. Holman, on the amendment in front of us. Ms. Johnson, on your amendment in front of us.
What are the costs when we go to the key bank as far as these basically line of credit?
Through the chair, we did give you a lay on the table AIM that told you the entire situation with the key bank. One of the debt instruments is at 2.5%.
Actually, no, that's not my question. With key bank, if we do not go for the full 14 or 20.6, and for the first month we just do 2.5, what cost do we incur by doing 2.5 for a month and then going the additional 12 million?
Through the chair, Ms. Johnston, we haven't gone back to Key Bank yet for the other borrowings. What happens with Mr. Risvold, I'm not sure he's here, but he measures against the cash pool, and then when he feels that it's appropriate to go to Key Bank and borrow, he does a draw. But to date, you've provided $4.5 million worth of funding, and Mr. Risvold hasn't gone back yet. So he determines when to go back.
Okay,
but
so
it's not the actual borrowing. It gives, what you're also doing is giving us spending and authorization so that we can fund the contracts that you've already approved.
my point is, and I hear Ms. Gerard, and she and I will not agree on this. My point is I am not comfortable with how this is being laid out to us. I feel that we are currently a consultant's dream. I do want the A team from the consultants, but I also want to make sure that we are negotiating in such a way that we are getting a project that's going to be completed on time, and I'm not there yet. What I'm asking for with the $2.5 million is I'm asking for a month. I'm saying if you can give us, because this gives the administration the next 2 weeks to come back to us with the support documentation that our auditor has suggested is the best approach for us to take. And our auditor's been raising flags. He has not given one report to us that looks good. And we're all sitting because we're all way out of our comfort zone. There's no question about it. But we don't know what to do about it. I'm saying this time trust the auditor, and we give the administration 2 weeks to come back to us with timelines and deliverables that we can feel at least comfortable that we've done our due diligence. And then I will have no problem going forward in such a way. I think Peloton has been a good trooper through this all, because we were really on track last fall with Peloton. And they have been knee-jerked around through this whole thing. And I have no intention of taking Peloton off from it. But I do feel, and I have no intention of throwing away SAP either. But currently, our implementation, as we go through this transition between two administration, is being done by a committee. So you have a committee, an administrative committee implementing, and they're all good folks. And I was wishing I could remember how that joke goes about an elephant in a committee, but I can't remember the punchline. I just remember everybody felt something different. But and the second committee is us. You know, and I just think this is when we get a little messy, but I don't want to commit to something right now at this time without at least us feeling somewhat comfortable. And as I say, this has nothing to do with Peloton, nothing to do. I have been a supporter of the SAP project from the get-go, and God help it, I hope it's done when I'm done. In fact, the mayor asked me the other day, what do you want to accomplish in your last year? And I said, I want that ERP. So do what you want, folks, but I feel that we are giving the administration a time to come back and make us comfortable and feel like we've done the due diligence that we need to do. We need to listen to our consultant. Ms. Gray Jackson and Ms. Dombowski got us a great consultant. And if he's way off base, we'll know that too. But I think there's just too many red flags. He has risk.
Mr. Flynn on the amendment in front of us.
Pass.
Ms. Gray Jackson on the amendment in front of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may make a comment from Ms. Johnson. Unfortunately, Ms. Johnson, we already found out that this project isn't going to be done before you leave. So just wanted to remind you of that. I'm sorry? Mr. Chairman, I've been the biggest critic of this project along with you from day one, and I'm still a critic of it, but I want to see us move forward. When is the next meeting with DIG?
In 2 weeks, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, if I can continue, I would really like to have a face-to-face meeting with DIG to talk about all of this before we move forward on the $21.6 million. And, with that said, I support Ms. Johnson's amendment, but I don't have all the documents in front of me, but I don't think that we approved all those contracts on Tuesday. I think there were some that we didn't approve. If somebody can confirm that.
We're probably going to reconsider the two of them.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Honeman?
Okay,
On the
so
amendment in front of us.
on the amendment, I hear what Ms. Johnston is saying, and I wholeheartedly agree that we are the secondary committee here, and we're going to be here. Some of the folks in the administration's committee may not in a month or so. I hope Peloton and I hope SAP's contractors that we have and consultants will be. And I firmly believe that going to the 2.5 isn't going to get us there. I have to trust Ms. Gyard. She's come in, she's given us facts, even though they might have not been the ones we wanted to hear, but she's broken it down in such a way that I feel much more confident that we are finally going the right direction. I hate to stop us. Ms. Gyard has given us a number of $14 million. Is that right, Ms. Gyard? Is what we have to be able to fund in order to continue to operate and move this project?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, so my question is, Ms. Gyard, you're going on holiday, on leave here soon, correct? For how long?
Yes, sir. I'll be back on June 1st.
Okay, so that I apparently will not be in time for the next contractor consultant meeting. So my request is of Peloton and SAP's consultant that are here, can we have a document that will meet the concerns of ZIG, our consultant, and in time for the next meeting with our consultant? Is that something that we can do, work as a team, even though Ms. Gyard may be not in town or in country?
Through the chair, if I may.
Ms. Gyard?
We are completely unaware of any concerns that ZIG has with this $21.6 million,
Did you send that to
nor of, and as far as the SAP QA, I discussed that with ZIG today and yesterday, and he is very comfortable with the idea that we move forward and do the quality assurance efforts. He wanted them to, go half and half. I talked to ZIG about that, and I was fine with that. But, we are staffing up for a June 1 a mass of people that we're trying to get on this engagement. And in order to do that, we have to fund the contracts. You have approved a $3.5 million contract with SAP, which has only been funded to the tune of $700,000. You approved a $5.696 million contract with Peloton, who is our primary source for SAP knowledgeable people. You approved a $76 million contract for scheduling assistance. You approved a $144,000 contract for senior project manager for PeopleSoft Data. We have to look at PeopleSoft Data warehousing. We are not going about this lightly. Hundreds of hours are spent before we give you a number. I laid out for you the theory by which we created the 21.6. It's 54,000 consulting hours to get you through Philo, which Ms. Johnston wanted, by April, which is Ms. Johnston's timeline, and then I told you it was going to cost you more for HCM. ZIG has not explained to me at all that he is uncomfortable with where we are in any of the public presentations that he's done, and I've not been privy at all to any of the comments, except for the one on SAP QA, which I got through Larry Baker. So if he's telling you things, I can't resolve that if I don't know about them, and I don't think that it's a fair way to behave.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a secondary motion, and that motion would be to change I could do a secondary motion, 21.6 to 4, I think it's 14 million that Ms. Gard had offered.
Yes,
Is that correct?
Yes, and I second that.
And I would like for my motion for the changes to be made, because I don't have a document in front of me, just the title, to be made in every area where it needs to be made. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
14.5?
Yes.
Motion was made by Ms. Gray Jackson, second by Mr. Honeman. Issue in front of us is to change the amount to 14.5. Let's see, Ms. Johnston?
When Ms. Garrard listed out those contracts, could you tell the terms of those contracts, the lengths?
Ms. Johnston, I don't have those terms in front of me. I pulled them off the assembly agenda quickly.
Right. I think, some of them, they're longer than, they're a year, they're, I mean, right?
Through the chair, the contracts that we proposed that were passed was $3.5 million for SAP. At the time, that was when the Assembly wanted something through 9:30. And so at that time, we gave you a 9:30 presentation. Since then, we've been asked to give you something to get to Philo Go Live Ready.
Right.
So we have done a number of different iterations.
Right. But my point is that some of these contracts are beyond the 1st of November, or 9:30.
November?
1st of September, I mean.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they
Yeah.
need to go beyond
But-
the 1st of September.
But I'm just sort of, the whole point of funding, I'm not saying that we shouldn't fund the contracts. I'm just saying that we do not need to fund it right now until we have till I'm comfortable. I don't know about the rest of you.
Okay, Mr. Starr and Mr. Evans, and then we need to get this motion voted on so we can move forward with the main motion.
You know, I'll just speak to the main motion.
Mr. Evans, sir? Okay. We have this subsidiary motion in front of us to change the amount to $14,500,000. Ms. Gray Jackson, please vote.
Yes.
Rest of the body to vote, brought up on the screen. Okay. It's a 5-5, and that's defeated. It's got to pass the 6. We're back to Ms. Johnston's amendment. Ms. Johnston, you want to restate your amendment, ma'am?
Mr. Chairman.
It's been a while. Mr. Flynn?
I'll move to reconsider.
Second.
And urge a yes vote, Mr. Evans.
Second.
It's been moved to reconsider. Yes vote's been urged. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Yes.
Please vote. That is approved by the body 9-1. Mr. Hall's not with us. We have back in front of us Ms. Gray Jackson's amendment. Let's vote on that. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Yes.
Please vote. That is approved. That is approved by the body. Vote was 7-3. We now have in front of us 2015-152 as amended. Mr. Starr.
You know, we're heading to a new mayor, probably new executive appointments, and so I think we need to have respect for the energies and the efforts of what we've committed to up to this point. It's going to be a different day, but we've made commitments. When we made pledges, we've hashed it out. We've asked for work sessions. We got them. Do we always agree with what we see and what we got? Probably not, but I feel like I'm committed until there's a different alternative. I'm one, can we do modules? Ms. Johnson knows all modules by name. Most of us don't, but I've always been of the mind that we would perhaps be better and easier to engage the employees and all the other stuff that goes into these implementations in small bites, and we want to do all 13 or 14 modules at the same time. That's not my call at this point. I certainly don't want to do it through financial manipulation. That's not typically my style. I educate myself on the topics and move through the best policy statement, which I've tried to do. Secondarily, I believe that we're trending towards using our consultant ZIG as our mechanism to communicate back to the executive branch, and I can't say that that's I don't say that in a derogatory way, but perhaps the inference is that because he identifies something, he's taking action or communicating that on our behalf to the administration. So I say if we get something that he identifies, and Ms. Johnson obviously is, we go to the administration and get our own facts. I've not wanted to cross that line, to be honest with you. Be roaming the halls of the executive branch in criticism of personnel performance isn't my job. So for that's what it said, I think we're still of a compromise. We don't make it a high priority for the first day of Mr. Berkowitz's new mayoral job. We've given him a little breathing room to get his arms around it, and hopefully we can engage solutions that will keep the ball rolling. So, Ms. Guyard, I can appreciate your frustration, certainly. I think that we're all sort of frustrated I feel like we've made the commitments to our subcontractors, our contractors, our people that can help us get out of this mess and help us proceed. I want to follow through on those commitments. So if 14.5 will get us there for, as you say, 4 or 5 months, I'm willing to have the conversation. So I'm just going to urge that we stay with it.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Honeman.
Well, I was going to say the exact same thing. Mr. Starr eloquently spoke, so I won't say it. Mr. Gyard, you weren't holding the hose. Maybe perhaps even SAP's consultant here today or Peloton Group, but we're all, the program and the project as presented got us all a bit wet. Some of us weren't even on the body when their first contract came in, recommended the ERP to this extent. I did talk to Zig after the last consultant meeting, and I asked the question pointedly, if we were to scrap this right now like the state did absent in their rebuild, which was a $28 million project that they've done funded, what would it take, what would it cost us, just ballpark? And he said that if we got into the B zone, B rate or C rate, all in cost, just an estimate is $25 to $30 million. And that's if we've started over here. So, you know, we're too late to go back. And that was just a number that he pulled off the top, and I'm not sure that would have got us to complete and everything we wanted. So as frustrated as you are, and I totally concur that we need to get our information packaged in a way that we're comfortable with so that we can be, as you say, comfortable. And I'm not comfortable. I've not been comfortable since this thing went wrong, and I think Ms. Gray Jackson missed one other person who right immediately, myself, Mr. Train and Ms. Gray Jackson. I know they led the train, but I voted against several amendments back when Ms. Mahoney was a CFO and they were running this program. But we're beyond that. And so, you know, please, Ms. Gyard, don't take the frustrations we're feeling out on yourself. I appreciate what you've been trying to get us to do. I think we're on the right track, and I think Zig can give us a better insight. So I request that we support this.
Mr. Evans, on the document in front of us is amended, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know, and that's the best answer I can give you because I honestly haven't a clue whether putting $21 million into this, $14 million or 2.5 this time is the right answer. And there's probably nothing you could give to me that would make me know that. It's an area that I'm glad that Mr. Honeman mentioned some of us weren't on the body then. I want to reiterate I wasn't. Distance myself as far as possible that I can from this mess. And I appreciate the frustration Ms. Gyard must be feeling. She's doing everything she knows how, I believe, to make this project work and convince us it's going to work and this is what we have to do. Unfortunately, she's standing on the shoulders of a giant mess that eventually this body supported, and eventually couldn't support any longer, and it came to a crisis phase. I don't understand enough about how this really works. I mean, I've sat through the briefings. I sat through briefings for over a year now where people told me it was working and it's going forward and it's on plan, blah, blah, blah. And I'll be honest, I don't understand exactly what the problems are. I don't necessarily trust our consultant any better than the people that are here working on it 24/7. He's somewhere else. He's looking in. I appreciate that voice and that outside perspective, but I'm not completely comfortable that his advice is any better than the advice I get on the other side. So I'm just going to throw up my hands and trust the administration, who is essentially doing this project, is doing it to the best of their knowledge. That's the only way I can complete my fiduciary duty at this time, because I just don't have the personal ability to know any better. So that's my position.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Steele, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. When we go through this, I try to put myself in the position of these folks that are working on it. Ms. Gyard, who's trying to get down the road a ways. If you're riding a horse and you want to go forward, you're not going to get where you want to go if you hold the reins too tight. Just as you're probably not going to get where you want to go if you let loose of them. And I know we're all frustrated. I've been frustrated since the first presentation I heard about this project. And that was some time ago, a couple of years now. But we're in a transition phase in this government, and we need to get past that, and we need to get some work done. you know, I empathize with Ms. Guyard in terms of the contractors getting frustrated. She's trying to gear up, trying to get going. So I think the happy medium that Ms. Gray Jackson offered is something that we can keep going. But if we keep starting and stopping and keep asking for special things, we're never going to get anywhere. And so we've approved some contracts, and we have a plan, and we ought to be going with it. So anyway, that's my concern.
We've got to get this vote done because one of our colleagues got to leave shortly. Ms. Johnston?
Well, I'm happier with this than the 20 million. I just wanted to say the reason I did the 2.5 million is I spoke to the mayor Tuesday night, and he said that would be fine. What he really wanted to do was get a number of people in the room, including Zig, when he came up next time, and just sort of hammer this out. So we'd come up with something that we could all, because we are all out of our comfort zone. And all I can think of is, you know, lots of times businesses will go and acquire another business, and they find out they've acquired a bad business. So the way of taking care of it is throw tons of money at it. And then when they finally do, somebody makes it work, they say, oh, see how much better we've got it going now. And you know, that's my concern. So, you know, that was why I took that approach, and let's vote.
Thank you. Before we vote on this, let me make one comment. Kate, you were not the captain of the ship that ran into the iceberg. I know who the CFO was that hit the rock and then bailed the ship. Thank you for bringing this to us. I don't like it, but I'll vote for it. But I do really wish we could have got the consultant that implemented it down in San Diego, because they did this for $39.8 million and got it operational and working. Maybe we should get that lady we were talking to on the phone up here for a 2-week vacation in Anchorage. It might save us some money.
Right, or we could hire Wade back, because they said they'd hire him again.
Well, maybe we could, ma'am. Let's vote on this. Mr. Gray Jackson?
Yes.
That item is approved. Next item in front of us tonight is 14I on your agenda. Item 14I is Ordinance 2015-36, Ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21 Land Use Planning, New Code, effective date 1 January 2014, to provide variance authority for various sections of code, to make changes in various sections for clarity, and to move standards of planned unit development from Chapter 3 to Chapter 7. From Community Planning Development, there's a semi-memorandum that comes with it, AM 208-2015. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Shake Jim McCurdy for the record. Hearing saying no, and public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Been moved and seconded. Mr. Starr, sir?
No, I'm not going to drag it out, but as we get closer to the implementation, Ms. Johnson, perhaps you can help us be certain that some things have potential to be appealed to the Assembly on those really, really contentious issues. You know, it's a citizen form of government, and ZEBA and Board of Adjustments, and some of that gets lost. So I haven't quite figured out how, in fact, the variance authorities are going to lay out for fair public process and the appeal process. I don't want any more work on this end, certainly, but we sometimes get ourselves into places where the Assembly is probably the final vote. So the second thing there is also I'll probably modify Chapter 10 is included in this too, our separate land use codes for Chugiak Eagle River. There may be authority basis sometime later, hopefully on your tenure over there with your expertise on Title 21. So thanks for getting this part done. I think this puts a lot of mechanisms in play that are good. No offense to BOA or ZEBA or UDC, but they're also agencies pretty far down the pecking list for very important stuff. Thank you.
No other comments? Please vote. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Yes.
Please vote. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14J. Ordinance CO 2015-45, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code of Regulations, Section 21.20.002, Schedule of Fees, Zoning, to exempt certain zoning applications from certain fees and waiving Planning and Zoning Commission review. And there's a coming AM with it, AM 254, 2015. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Comments from Assembly members? Ms. Gray Jackson, you need your vote, ma'am? Okay, please vote. That item was approved by the body. Next item in front of us, item 14K. Ordinance 2015-46, ordinance adopting the Chester Creek Watershed Plan as an element of the comprehensive plan, amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21 Land Use Planning, Old Code Section 21.05.030D, and amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21 Land Use Planning, New Code Section 21.01.080B, Table 21.01-1, Community Development Department. There's an AM with it, AM 255, 2015. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no, and public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from Assembly members. If not, please vote. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Yes.
Please vote. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front is item 14L, Ordinance CO 2015-39, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Code of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 7 regarding regarding routine reporting and assembly approval of sole source procurement awards. Public, and there's an AM with it. AM 230-15. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Hearing saying no, and public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from Assembly members. If not, please vote. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Yes.
Please vote. That item is approved.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Honeman.
We have two items that we had addressed on Tuesday. I'd like to make a motion to reconsider. I can do them both at the same time or one at a time. Which one?
Madam Clerk, one at a time.
One at a time. I thought so. Under the addendum to the agenda, it'll be item number 9 Delta 13, Assembly Memorandum 324-2015. It's a sole source purchase of consulting services from Gartner Incorporated, and it's through Ms. Guyard can address the concern. Motion to reconsider. I urge a yes vote.
Second.
No, we haven't.
We've not
the meeting is
stopped the
continued.
meeting. This is
The meeting still continued.
Right.
So the reconsideration was to move it to May 26th? I mean, the action
We
that
had
we
taken
took?
action to move to May 26th. That's correct. And Ms. Guyard had concern. We can address that. So I just urge a reconsideration for the item. Item number 9 Delta 13 on the addendum to the agenda under new business.
Okay. Do we know what we're voting on?
Just to reconsider.
Just to reconsider it.
I urge a yes.
We'll vote now. Hold on. Tell me when you're ready, ma'am. Okay. We'll now vote. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Yes.
Please vote. Enough. Take 6 to reconsider it. It's majority. It's majority. It takes 6. We got to 7. That item is reconsidered.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Honeman.
Ms. Gyard can speak more eloquently to this, but we had originally moved this to the meeting of May 26th for some further reporting from her office references. But Ms. Gyard, could you please address what concern was, please?
Yes, quickly, Mr. Chairman, this is a contract with Gartner to evaluate our options and to evaluate the upgrade proposal that SAP has given us. So they will be evaluating on our behalf the upgrade proposal to make sure it's priced accordingly and that we have addressed all of the issues to ensure that the upgrade goes smoothly. We're asking you to take this up now because we need to get that contract underway in order to keep up with our schedule.
And Ms. Gyard, may I have one question, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Go ahead, sir.
Ms. Gyard, if we don't do this today, what could there be consequences to this?
Well, we have a contract waiting for signature with Gartner. We've been on the phone with them, and we have a proposal for the upgrade from SAP. So we're trying to move this ball forward.
Kate, what's the dollar amount?
Dollar amount of the total contract is $632,000. It comprises a seat, a Gartner seat for the CFO for 1 year, a $200,000 contract to evaluate the SAP upgrade proposal, and a $300,000 contract to do total cost of ownership assessment on the SAP so that we'll know what the total cost of ownership is going to be once we upgrade this in preparation for the next year's budget.
And one last clarification.
Go ahead, sir.
And
I've got a few others.
this can be helpful as we transition to the new administration. Is that right, Ms. Gardner?
Through the chairman, yes, that's correct. We really need to know that when we do the SAP upgrade and we pay them the amount that they're asking us to pay, we're doing the right thing.
Ms. Johnston, ma'am.
And so, and I think I had this question I asked earlier. So is the upgrade and this contract, how does this work as far as the timeline, as far as the blueprint? How does it affect it?
Through the chair, while the blueprint is ongoing, which starts at the beginning of June and runs through the end of September, we will be evaluating, contracting, and probably beginning the upgrade in parallel. So these items we've explained to you, we're going to continue with the blueprint and the development, but we also have to upgrade the system. So we want them to occur in parallel so that we get the most efficiency out of them. And that's this Gartner contract will help us keep that moving down that path.
Ms. Johnston, anything else? Okay. Mr. Honeman?
I move to approve this item.
Item 9D13. Is there a second? We've got the document in front of us. Ms. Dembowski, on the document in front of us, ma'am.
Sorry.
What? Nothing? Okay. No other discussion. Please vote. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Yes.
Please vote. That item was approved. The next document needed to be back in front of us.
Yes. Move to reconsider, Mr. Chairman, item 9 Delta 15, which was on the consent agenda. Excuse me, the addendum to the agenda. And this is Assembly Memorandum 326-2015, change order number 2 to purchase order number 2014-1679 with SAP Public Services Quality Assurance Audit to the Synergy Project. And Ms. Gyard has
by Ms. Gray-Jackson.
I second.
Ms. Gyard, why should we reconsider action to move this to 526?
Mr. Chairman, we are at the first gate check very soon for SAP to come up here and evaluate where we are. If we move this to the 26th, we probably won't be able to schedule them up till the middle of June. They were supposed to be here on the 18th. They're now the week of the June 1st, and those gate checks are very important to make sure that we're on board. So I've spoken with Zig, who had a problem about the full contract amount of $2.5 million, which takes you all the way through go live. It's that insurance that I talked to you about. Zig felt that we should probably break that in half. There's a natural breaking point at roughly 1.2 million, and that will get you through the blueprint phase and into the beginning of the development, where a number of gate checks are very important for you to have some security. So the 1.2 million will buy you 3 gate checks, 2 technical design reviews, like what SAP did and gave you a report on, a conversion, that's our PeopleSoft conversion evaluation, and 1 testing review, and testing was a big failure point. So they're going to do 2, but 1.2 million will buy 1 of them.
I urge my colleagues to have a yes vote to reconsider, and I intend to make an amendment to this.
Mr. Starr, on the motion to reconsider, sir?
No, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, let's please vote on reconsideration. Ms. Gray Jackson,
Yes.
please vote.
Brings back in front of us.
And Mr. Chairman?
Oh, wait till we're done with this. That we reconsider the document. I need a motion on this.
I'd like to move to approve, but I'd like to amend the amount.
Well, make the motion to approve it first.
Move to approve.
Second.
And that's to approve item 9D15 for our addendum to the agenda?
And Mr. Chairman, yes, 9 Delta 15 on the addendum to the agenda under consent items.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend that amount to $1.2 million instead
You
of
moved that. Who was the second on that? Pete was. Okay. Right. Okay.
Yes, I'd like to amend the amount for the project at 1.2 million instead of 2.5. So just replace on the document.
1.2 million?
Yes, correct.
Was that you seconded that, Mr. Peterson? Mr. Holdeman, your amendment?
I think it's Mr. Giard's explained it enough. We need to get this project moving and the gate checks and the testing.
Mr. Starr, on the document.
Again, I thank you, Ms. Geyer, for the information briefly yesterday, but the contract length would be a concern as it's written here. The Assembly approval does still go out to 2016. Do we have a mechanism in purchasing that would not bind us for that inside the purchase contract for this, or do we need to change that date? Because I don't want to allude that we fully funded to 2016.
Through the chair, I think if you put it through March of 2016 rather than December, you'd be fine.
Okay, I'll have to come back and do that. We're talking about a motion. The other one is, does the scope of work in this particular case review any of the documentation module that you're working on?
Yes, through the chair, yes, Mr. Starr. It certainly gate checks the documentation. It also performs a gate check of what the team has been doing for the past month, which is called the planning phase.
At the 1.2 mark that
Yes,
we're
sir.
proposing. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion before we vote on this item? Is this document okay, Kate, the way it is, or we didn't make a change to the date on it? Yeah. But there's no other amendments you need to make? Okay. Let's vote on this one. Ms. Gray Jackson, on the amendment in front of us.
Yes.
Please vote. That is approved by the body. We now have in front of us item 9D15 as amended.
I have a
Mr. Starr, sir.
concern of purchasing, when we modify the date in our approval for appropriation, does that run foul with your contract as signed? Do I need to?
Could we get you up the microphone? I hate to have you walk up there, but
Yeah, it just has to be
the
on the
clerk's
record.
got to be able to hear your voice.
Do we need to do that up here? Do you have contract terms in there that allow the flexible funding to occur like we just did?
I have been negotiating the flexible funding.
Okay, thank you. I have no amendment then.
Any other discussion in front of us before we vote on this item? Ms. Gray Jackson, please vote.
Yes.
Let's vote on this item. That item is approved by the body. We're now down to special orders. There are none. We're in finished agenda. There is none. Audience participation. If anybody wants to talk to us about anything, now's the time for 3 minutes. Not seeing anybody. We're down to assembly comments. I just want to tell you one thing. Thank you guys for coming here on Thursday. I know we just didn't get it done on Tuesday, but thanks for taking the time out of your life to come here at 1 o'clock on Thursday.
Congratulations, graduates. Move to adjourn.
Not yet.
Oh, never mind.
We get to see each other on Tuesday because we have to certify the election and to recertify the first election.
Okay.
And I'll see you again then.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? We're adjourned. Thanks for
Thank
being
you,
here.
Madam Clerk.